Good evening, everyone. The time is 5:30. I'd like to be mindful of our time this evening, so I will call the meeting to order. Mr. Petrowski, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Daniels,
Here.
Ms. Green, Mr. Madsen,
Here.
Mr. Majors,
Here.
Ms. Rawls,
Here.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Present.
Ms. Powers.
Present. Thank you. We will begin our committee business. We are going to begin with the work of the Public Safety Committee. Chair, Councilman Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam President. To start off our Public Safety Committee, we have our Public Safety Quarterly Reports. I see Commissioner Carter. Thank you for joining us this evening. If you'd like to begin.
Sure. City Council members, I hope that you have a copy of the annual internal report, the investigations that were handed in, that we completed for the year of 2021. Do you have that information with you?
Commissioner will review his report, and then Mr. Petrowski will share copies with everyone.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Okay, for the calendar year of 2021, this is the annual report. We had 21 complaints filed. Of these, 6 investigations were conducted by the IA unit. 14 were handled by a platoon supervisor. The demographics was 19 white male, 3 white females, 3 black males, 1 Hispanic male, and 1 Hispanic female. The type of complaints, 18 were simple misconduct, meaning that people didn't appreciate the way that my officers talked to them. 1 use of force and 1 conduct. I guess it means that they didn't like the way that they were talked to. And in addition to that, I ordered the IA unit to conduct 3 investigations, which were 2 were confirmed by IA and 1 was not. For the simple misconduct, there were 3 white males, 1 white female, 8 black males, 1 black female. Out of all of them, 2 of those were confirmed, 9 were unfounded, 2 was not confirmed, and 5 were insufficient evidence. And that's basically all that I have for the annual.
Okay, thank you for that. I was under the impression we would get a quarterly for like the past from January to March.
I believe that the quarterly is due out later. I believe in the city council ordinances says that we have to give the annual from all of last year.
Okay, I know we the specific committee, we had an agreement on kind of making it more of a robust form instead of just the police reporting, police, fire, and codes. I had spoken with the directors personally. If that did change, that's not a problem. I do appreciate you coming and giving us that. But for future reference, if we could have the quarter relating to the current quarter we're in, that would be appreciated.
Okay, the quarterly should be out later this month.
Awesome, thank you. Better line? Thank you, right on time. Absolutely. Thank you for joining us, Chief.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
I heard just a little bit as I walked in. This month for, I know Chief Carter and myself, data from the weekend, which is still last quarter, still it's a tough thing to get in the first 4 days of the month. So just as we're a little behind as well.
Absolutely.
You should, in your packet that Mr. Petrosky sent out, I sent a bunch of pages. I'll just briefly go over it, and then if there's any questions, you'll feel free to ask. I'll try and give you a 30,000-foot view, so they're not here all night listening to me talk. But we continue to do our emergency management stuff from weather, looking at the specific storms, weather data. You guys get the weather reports we send out when there's potential for impacting the city. A big part of our over the winter springtime is monitoring Paxton Creek and the Susquehanna River, obviously for flooding, and we've been very fortunate this past year with no issues. COVID-19 still in our weekly our weekly to-do list, reviewing the BioBot data, which is measuring the COVID-19 in the sewer effluent from Capital Region Water. And those numbers as of last week have been almost non-detectable. So that's a great thing for the city, and we'll just continue to monitor that. We've been also working closely with homeless sheltering and encampment issues, winter overnight shelters, showers, support a bunch of the agencies that take care of our homeless population here in the city, which seems to continuously be growing. We're working with codes and police. We have a great, as well as business and licensing on some illegal businesses, specifically some hookah lounges that we were dealing with. We had to take some pretty drastic measures, but we're happy to report that those have been, for the most part, now taken care of. And we had some significant issues with those over the last several months. Councilman Rodriguez, as you'll be aware, we developed a community outreach program with Community Life Team EMS in the Bureau of Fire. And we had one successful CPR event held at Station 2. Our next one, CPR again being held uptown at the fire station on North 6th Street on April the 19th. And that's going to be an ongoing agreement and training with Community Life Team for the residents. We're looking at some bike safety things, maybe getting recycled bicycle involved, car seat safety, things like that, as well as we go through the summer. And then looking at some wintertime issues as we get into fall and winter. So whether that's cooking or, and also bringing some health experts in if folks in the community don't necessarily have the access to healthy eating habits and things like that. UPMC has a great platform to do that with. So we're going to bring that into the fire station as well. Been working closely with Harrisburg School District on a mentorship program at John Harris to focus on recruitment, but also on community engagement. We just talked with the union last week, and they're on board with moving forward. So we're going to work with the junior ROTC program out there and probably reinvigorate our junior firefighter program that was successful in conjunction with the West Shore Bureau of Fire, and try and touch some of those young folks that we so often lose. We got great jobs here in Harrisburg. We just can't seem to keep them here, and we want to try and encourage them and get them involved with this. And I think that the ROTC program is probably a great place to start. And some of what that might look like, or what that's going to look like, is firefighters going out, actually teaching some classes, participating in or running the physical education program on Fridays. So we have a lot of ideas. We just got to get those folks picked out now that we have the union and agreement of how we're going to do that, and move that forward to the membership and get those volunteers to sign up to get out there. I've been working on a lot of training, so I just put in training education. And right now, all of our firefighters are going through a fire safety inspection class, so that we can better collaborate with codes to do not only business inspections, but multifamily residential inspections as well, which is where we see a lot of our issues at. So whether that's a multifamily apartment building or some of these boarding houses, they'll be able to more readily identify those. And then Also, taking that to another level is going out with codes and doing inspections jointly with them, and possibly bringing the health inspector in on some of the corner stores and restaurants and things like that that we deal with on a regular basis. And probably our most important thing we did this year is hired 5 new recruits. They're currently in the Hack Fire Academy, and they are slated to graduate in early June. They will then do a several-week program in-house to get up to speed on water rescue and things like that we do that isn't offered through the Fire Academy. We're continuously working with contractors throughout the city with a lot of building projects going on. So we've been touring facilities, reviewing plans and proposals, submitting recommendations for those. We've been working on integration of technology into the Bureau. Currently, the IT department, GIS, has been phenomenal for us. We are a few steps ahead of really where we thought we would be on developing a database of abandoned and blighted buildings in the city. They're a danger to our firefighters on a daily basis. Not only are they a danger to the residents, but they're a danger to us when we go and they're on fire. And to be able to have that information on the computer terminals in the fire truck as they're being dispatched, they'll be able to recognize and identify those prior to arriving on scene. So that'll be huge for us. We're also working on incident reporting. Unfortunately, our incident reporting software that we just implemented last year was bought out by another company, and now they're merging. So we're going to have another growing pain to go through here in the next probably 12 to 18 months. And so as we're learning this new system, we're going to end up having to learn another system. And we're hoping the reports and everything kind of stay the same. It's going to be interesting. We've implemented a voluntary NFPA 1582 health screening program for all of our members, both career and volunteer. That program is being administered by UPMC. UPMC has been a great partner for the Bureau of Fire for many, many years. This will take care of a lot of the health issues. Get these screenings done prior to things happening. Firefighters just don't like to go to the doctor. We just don't like to do it. This will give them that encouragement, and also has a mental health component to it, which we see all too often. We actually lose more firefighters in the United States every year, 125 plus to suicide. And it's because of the stress of the job. Being able to recognize, identify that, and have the outlet for them to go with UPMC, get them in the right direction, will be a positive thing for the membership. So we have our first members are getting notification this week to be able to go for those voluntary screenings. And this has all been grant funded for the next 3 years through a FEMA grant that was in conjunction with Harrisburg, Susquehanna Township, Lower Paxton Township, and Swadera Township. So it was really the first regional grant in central Pennsylvania for anything of this magnitude. So we're pretty excited and proud of what we've been able to do with that. And just a couple of updates on new fire apparatus. We have the new Tower 1 that we ordered a year and a half ago. Was supposed to be delivered this month. Supply chain issues. We hope to see it this year. I'm cautiously optimistic. We ordered, as you recall, in the 2021 budget, council had approved 2 new engines, a Wagon 3 and Squad 8. They were ordered in December of 21, and looks like summer of 23 they'll be delivered. And we're going to begin working on specifications for a new ladder truck later this year to be able to get that on the capital budget. And I should note that, and I believe council understands, but we're really only paying for 50% of a fire truck because we have the Volunteer Firemen's Relief Association in the city. They are able to pay for 50%. So we're essentially buying a fire truck at 50% of cost every time we buy one. So it's a phenomenal savings to the taxpayers. And it's great to be able to keep that apparatus. At the end of the day, from the maintenance standpoint, we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes, helps to keep those maintenance costs down and keep those fire trucks readily available and without breakdown. I'll just give a real high overview on the call volume. We're trending a little higher than we had been in prior years. January was an extremely busy month for us. One thing that I will say, and I really should have started the entire report off with this, none of this is possible. None of the great things that the Fire Bureau has done this year so far, has done in the last years, is possible without the men and women of the fire department. And I think the public needs to understand that our men and women do a phenomenal job day in and day out. We may not have fires every day, which is a good thing for the residents. But when we do have fires, the residents need to be proud and understand what those career firefighters do for the city of Harrisburg. That response time just over the weekend, last week, actually on Friday, without a doubt, had we not had a career department with the response time that we did, we would have had racked up a fatality. And that happens time and time again. And we underreport that. We don't talk about that because the gentleman was rescued by our firefighters, arriving first on scene within 2 minutes of the dispatch. And not much longer after that, and he would have been in cardiac arrest from smoke inhalation. So when we look at everything that we do, it's all for the citizens. Sometimes we're not, it seems like we're a big, money pit, if you will. But at the end of the day, those lives at the end of the day are saved, property is saved. That fire was contained on Friday to one apartment. Had that been anywhere else, without a career staff, without that response time, it would have been a total loss. So not only do we lose the resident, which is horrendous, then we also lose the building, which comes off the tax rolls, which is tax money, and it's just a cyclical issue. So as we look at that, fire loss has been trending pretty decently this year. We're about 375,000 in fire loss, and the property saved is about 2.3 million. So that's a pretty good response in my book. One of the issues that we do see is some overlapping incidents. Currently, we see a pretty decent number of those, and that's what we're basing our potential for adding another engine company in the coming year or two. And that's why we asked for those additional budgeted positions. So as you'll recall, council approved 6 additional positions, but the budgeted complement is 104 now, which is more than it's been since the early 1980s. And as we look at that, if we bring all those firefighters online this year and next year, we'll be able to protect the citizens even more and eliminate some of those overlapping incidents where we have to split crews, and it's just not a good situation. The false alarms continue to plague us. However, I know that Mike Hughes and his team, we submit those every month for billing. And, you would think that after you get a bill multiple months in a row, that you would get your fire alarm system fixed, and we just don't see that happening. And that's unfortunate. And council several years ago actually raised the cost of a false alarm significantly in hopes of maybe encouraging those repairs and things. And we're still not seeing the fruits of that yet. We're still responding a lot of times, putting a lot of folks in danger every time we go out there to a false alarm, unfortunately. So injuries, we continue to trend downward in COVID in the Fire Bureau. We've been very lucky in the Fire Bureau from a COVID standpoint. And we review now through our Joint Training and Safety Board that the union and management sit on. We review each of those injuries on a bi-monthly basis. So we meet with the union's JTSB. It's a union and management committee, and we review training, things like that. We also review those injuries to see what we can do to prevent some of those. I did want to say, and I totally skipped over it, when you look at NFPA 1710, which is a standard we apply to career fire departments, we have to respond 90% of the time within 5 minutes or less. Currently, we are at 4.67 minutes for all class 1, meaning lights and siren emergencies. So we're just meeting that standard. We do have some service lapse areas in the city on the south side and some of the uptown where we're outside of that. But that's where that 10% gives you that little bit of a buffer when we're looking at that. So we're hoping as we implement our PAC staying into the Bureau of Fire over the next several months, is that works its way through both their council and our council, that we may be able to position a piece of fire apparatus in PAC staying, which will help eliminate or decrease some of those response times that are on that upper end of 5+ minutes, specifically to the south side. We believe we can take care of some of those from that. Other than that, I wanted to highlight got a lot of paper in there. Just wanted to highlight where we were budget-wise. I think that's important since that's your job to control our budget. We are well within budget at this point. And as we look at, and I look at the trending numbers, payroll is around $239,000 every 2 weeks, which is on par with budget. Our overtime is averaging about $17,000 every 2 weeks, which is on par. We'll actually be under budget at those numbers. And that doesn't take into account the 5 new firefighters are going to help reduce some of that overtime for those folks that are off or injured. Interestingly enough, when we go back to 2013, which wasn't that far in the distant past, our overtime budget, remember I just told you that was $17,000 biweekly. We were paying $105,000 biweekly in overtime just back in 2013. So that hiring has paid off and saved the city a boatload of money as we look at it from a financial standpoint. And it's put more firefighters on the street, made the firefighters safer and made our citizens safer as well. And when we look at, I'm not going to go into any budget details there. The overtime, I think, is a true story. And we're trending, we got about 23,000 already spent in equipment and apparatus repairs. And that we have a pretty significant repair coming up that we're trying to work through right now. It's going to be $20-some thousand just for one fire truck. And those repairs just they're unpredictable. And unfortunately, fixing a fire truck is just like fixing your car at home. It's not cheap. And the labor is expensive and the parts are even more expensive. And unfortunately, the parts are just not available. It's a very tough situation right now. So without anything else, if entertain any questions you may have.
I don't currently. If council would like to, I was going to go through the reports in totality and then ask if they had any questions, if that was okay. Is anyone here from codes to present at all? No. Ms. Chardin, do you have anything prepared for the CSAs? Well, I think council would just like to know an update how the CSAs have been doing. I know I've sent correspondence to you personally. I haven't gotten replies, just some updates to see. I know we spoke about that even in the beginning of the year during budgeting time. I'm pretty sure council would appreciate an update in some form. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Hello.
Well, if you guys don't know me, I'm Chardin Houston, Director of Community Relations and Engagement. And as far as the CSAs are concerned, we've been busy. Right now, this week, they're in scenarios with Captain Milo Hooper, who does scenarios for the new officers. So they're assisting with role acting in any capacity that they can. For the past, I've been in this role for the past almost 3 months now. And we've been just busy also working internally to become a team so that we can look that way externally. Excuse me. And as far as being busy, I mean, they've been doing not only some of the community policing side, which is their non-reportable accidents, dealing with quality of life issues, whether it's parking, whether it's neighborhood disputes that aren't violent, whether it's going out to nuisance homes where there's been loitering, there's been trash litter, going around looking for illegal dumping. If somebody has notified them of such activity. I know, like you said, Mr. Rodriguez, you've sent over follow-up calls that they could look into as far as, again, parking issues, such as no parking sign where they think there should be a parking sign, whether it's, we got calls as far as a church member who was having problems with the person coming frequently, unfortunately, and causing a disturbance at the church. And we tried to make contact with that person. The CSAs tried to make contact with that person. So again, anything dealing with quality of life issues that are forwarded our way, whether it be from an officer or from chain of command, that's what they're doing. They're also being dispatched by the Dauphin County dispatch as well for, again, quality of life issues, non-reportable accidents. I'm sure you guys were made aware of the huge accident that took place on Cameron Street, in which our CSAs were actually one of the first people on the scenes and were able to assist with the traffic control and things of that nature. And they did a wonderful job. And so I commend them for that. As far as, like I said, getting training, they got CPR training a couple weeks ago. So they've been working, that was a whole day event. They've been attending, they've had actually people come in and do orientations. They've also gone to different orientations like Downtown Daily Bread. They had a tour, and Downtown Daily Bread was one of them where they did a tour. We got to sit with some of the customers that come in and go out of there to see how we can be a resource to them. I've been working on a partnership with a Hoop It Up event, which is a national 3-on-3 basketball tournament event that will be coming to Harrisburg on June 4th. So we've been working back and forth with that entertainment company and that organizer on getting things together for that. So we've been busy. And like I said, and it's, as anyone knows, that when you're starting a new program and implementing a new program, things don't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes time quite frankly, I'm their third director. So it took time for us to get to know each other, for us to understand where we stand as individuals and then also as colleagues. And really that's the update that I have for that.
No, I appreciate that. And being as though you are the last one, I believe, for the report, I will open it up to council if they have any questions. I'll start with my immediate right, Councilwoman Daniels.
Oh. I guess.
I'll go, Councilman Majors.
Thank you. I guess so I'm gonna make these, I guess, questions / comments on the record, since I know our police commissioner is no longer here and our fire chief is left. Just first of all, I want to thank the Chief Ederline for his report. It was very comprehensive, thorough. It left me not with too many questions, since there's a significant breakdown all the incident types that occurred throughout the first quarter, a lot of the work that they're currently doing. I think I'll speak for myself. It will be a model that I would like to see other departments provide to us if they're going to be doing quarterly reports, to the extent that they can provide that type of detailed information that doesn't share any personal information. It just talks about the incident types, the amount of calls that they have visited, the type of call, and a lot of the mutual aid that they're doing and other partnerships that they're looking to create in our community. So first of all, just want to commend Chief and the department for that work. That was very extensive. One question I would have is just with respect to the mutual aid calls that they did run, and if there's any, what those partnerships look like in terms of with those communities, or if it's just they call down the call box and make sure that they have the assistance that they need. Would have loved to hear from the police commissioner, but those questions can be followed up with in writing. And then for Ms. Houston, hello, welcome. Good to see you in this new capacity. So if we could get something similar from your team. One of the things that I'll speak for myself, and I'm sure other members of council have heard, is the work that I guess now the CSAs are being involved in with the school district to some extent. Could you talk a little bit about what that partnership or what that contact looks like with the CSAs being involved with the school district?
Oh, honestly, right now, their only capacity is to go up there and to act as mentors as much as possible. They're not to be security. I'll be very clear with that. From my understanding, from my perspective, they're not there to be security. They're there, that's not their role. They're there to be mentors as much as possible, state their presence, and help hopefully reduce some of the issues that they've been having within the schools as far as, quite frankly, disturbances. Like I said, they're not acting as security, but I have seen with their presence just being there, and because of the age group of some of the CSAs, there's a relatability there. There's an understanding, and some of them were also paraprofessionals in their previous careers. So it's made it easy for them to be able to go into the school and create relationships with them. They're not stationed there all day. I see it as a call that they go out on, just like if they would go to a non-reportable accident. They may be there for an hour, 2 max. But again, it's to make their presence known, let them know if we can be a resource to them in some kind of way, if we can offer some sort of social services that they may be lacking, then we will try to point them in that direction.
Okay, and then is there a formal relationship now between the school district and the city with respect to the CSAs being up there, or is this just, are these calls, or is it a, a set time frame every day, and are they at all the schools or just at the high school?
So we actually are down 1 team member. So we ask that they act as, we have them partnered up right now. There's 6 CSAs, so they're in 3 teams. So they're not to really be going on calls by themselves because they do need, I would like them to be partnered up as much as possible. So there currently is, well, like I said, this week they're not there because they're at scenarios this
Okay.
week. But at Roland, there is Ms. Bowers and Mr. Spears. And then at Camp Curtin, there's Mr. Holmes and Mr. Brooks. And they go during lunchtime to try again to be able to reach as many students as they're able to. And then they try to go after school at the let out as well to help with some of the riffraff that has been transpiring after school as well.
Okay, and was this a formal request made by the school district, or is this just us trying to provide some type of intervention service? That's what I'm trying to understand, because I don't have an issue with it. I'm just, if are we having any conversations about formalizing that relationship, since it seems to be, and are they doing lunch and after school on a daily basis when they're not in scenario training?
Honestly, if they're not on another call, then they may be there, or if they're out, I told them if they're out on a different call, then they handle that call. But if they're able to get out for lunches and get out for after school, then they're also able to do that as well. But I also like them to attend roll calls with police officers so that they can establish those relationships as well. So they're also assigned different times where they're to attend roll calls
Okay,
as well. So
It's
not
not
every single day.
formalized. So
Right.
it's an understanding that's, will work, that will progress.
okay,
When you see how effective, the things are most effective with, whether it becomes a formal thing, I think will depend on leadership in both sides, whether they feel the need to formalize the relationship.
okay. No further questions at this time. I may have follow-up, but thank you, Chair Rodriguez.
Thank you, Councilman. Madam President?
Thank you, Chair Rodriguez. Good evening. First, I'd like to thank Chief Enterline and Commissioner Carter for being present, and thank you, Councilman Rodriguez, for spearheading the Public Safety Quarterly Report. Thank you, Ms. Houston, for being here. I just have a few follow-up questions, I guess. Many of my questions were answered regarding the schools that the CSAs are at, the length of time that they're there. So when did this, I guess, pilot program begin?
pilot program for the schools?
Yes.
Probably about, I'll say 3 weeks ago. It took place about 3 weeks ago.
And right now it's intended to run through the end of the school year at least?
Correct.
Okay, I don't think I have any other questions. I would like to receive additional data, as Councilman Majors mentioned. I think Chief Enterline or Chair Rodriguez may provide a nice template for everyone to share the same information. That way it's clear and concise in that way and easy for everyone to digest. So we'll share that moving forward, but thank you.
Thank you, President Bowers. Councilwoman Green?
Thank you. I don't really have any questions. The questions I had were asked already. I do look forward to the quarterly report from the police department as well as the CSA program. And then hopefully we can get an update from Codes as well during that time. Be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Madsen?
Yep. Good evening. First, I just want to thank all our folks in law enforcement and the fire department for all they do and keeping the community safe. Miss Houston, so question I have is regarding the CSAs. Will we get to a point where they could walk a beat? I know they're not first responders, but I do think their presence would give a lot of the community some comfort at times, you know, especially around this quality of life stuff. I know when I've been out campaigning, for example, you know, I'll come across maybe some kids on the bikes and I'll talk to some of the neighbors and they'll point out, hey, they actually put the bikes in this garage. And I've been able to work with the police department on responding to things like that. So just from me walking around, I've been able to fix a couple of quality of life issues. Is that something that's in the works for the CSAs in the near future?
They're currently doing that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Good.
they're not to be sitting in the office. I gave them a list of over 4,000 businesses in the city of Harrisburg. So my goal, my hope is that they would make contact with each and every one that are in existence because they have a buy-in in this community and in the city. So it's important for them to know who the CSAs are, what they do, and how they can be a resource to them. So yes, I mean, they are walking around, they're going to different businesses. That's part of also their calls. If they're not on a call, if they're not at the school, my request is that they make contact with a certain, I gave each of the teams a business list that they can tackle. And like I said, and make contact with them. So if they're not out walking around, or if they're not making contact with any of the businesses, or if they're not on a call, if they're not at school, then they need something else to do. So, yeah.
Would it be possible for council, because I know a lot of us, when we're campaigning or just out at community events, get who is responsible for which area and what their shifts are or times that they typically walk around, because then we could probably point a constituent in their direction for whatever the issue may be it fireworks or noise or whatever.
Absolutely. I'll just be very honest with you, you know, what in the grand scope of things, 6 CSAs for the entire city of Harrisburg, it's hard to expect them to cover an extensive amount of ground. They can't be in, you know, several places at once,
Yep.
Especially when they're being pulled in different directions, but I will do my best to make sure that that's communicated to you all as well, and their shifts and what districts they cover.
Great.
Absolutely.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Totally understand what the compliment is. That would be a stretch, but please let us know if it's going well, if we can up that compliment.
Thank you.
And then my question would be for the commissioner at this point. The substation in Allison Hill, some constituents had reached out to me. Are there police present there, or when are they present? I was asked some questions about how frequently officers would be there if there's concerns in that part of the city.
It's open, sir. There's a secretary there. There's police in and out of the office regularly.
Can you please speak into the microphone? Thank you.
The substation is open. There is a secretary there working. Police officers on all 3 shifts are in and out of the substation regularly.
Okay. If I follow up with that constituent, is there, so just normal business hours, they can go in and check and talk to them about?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. That's it for me. Oh, I guess one last question I have is, with all the talk of the tolling that's happening, a concern that the county has mentioned and surrounding communities is that traffic volume will increase, particularly on the Harvey Taylor Bridge. If we do have an increased amount of traffic volume, given our police complement's fairly low, I guess is there any strategy that the administration may have to the uptick in traffic volume through those areas?
I'm sure that they're working out something now when it comes to the bridge that's state property. So PSP will be helping us out if we need help. But I'm sure that there'll be a lot of traffic running into the city, and the traffic volume in the city will just be outrageous, especially on Cameron Street and other major thoroughfares.
Yeah. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Mattson. Councilwoman Ross.
Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez. And good evening to everyone. And thank you, Commissioner Carter and Chief Interline. I know he left, but I do thank him too and Ms. Houston for providing us with some type of update and report for today. And I do look forward to one. I'm sure Councilman Rodriguez will get a template together to make sure that we have very detailed reports moving forward, so we can keep ourselves as well as the public up to date with what's happening. I had one question, Ms. Houston, with the CSAs. What mental health aspect looking forward may there be with the CSAs, especially in the school district? I know now that it's not on record as them being working directly with a partnership, but what type of mental health aspect may we be looking for in the future?
So I'm hopeful that in the very near future, they'll be able to sign up for mental health training and to receive some sort of certification or some understanding of how to de-escalate certain situations. So I've been looking at several different training programs. At first, we were looking at some that were free, then we were looking at some that cost, and then also, waiting for the budget to come through so that we can make that determination. I've actually reached out and been working with Tri-County Community Action. Christina Johnson has been very instrumental in sharing her knowledge and wealth of information as far as trainings are concerned. So my goal is to at least get them some sort of training. I'll be very honest. The CSAs do not have backgrounds in mental health. They were not hired under that understanding. So if you're looking for them to have, degrees or have specialized things in that, they don't have that. None of them, like I said, are certified in any of that, in any sort of mental training capacity. But I am hopeful and looking towards changing that, at least from a seminar perspective, or like I said, if they're able to gain just a little bit of training for de-escalation and how to work with mental health patients as they encounter them, as they go into the schools and they act as mentors, how to deal with de-escalation in certain situations with the youth. Those things are very important. So yes, moving forward, we will be looking to get them trained in some capacity.
Good, thank you. That's why I was
Yeah.
asking, because they may encounter those issues, and sometimes that's one of the huge issues, but being able to de-escalate that with some type of training. Thank you. My only other question, because the rest were answered when my other fellow council members asked about the school district. Now, this one is not for you. You probably, I don't know who could answer this, but I know Chief Interline had pointed out the false alarm calls, I believe. And my question was, I know we said council had put in place a higher, the word just left my brain, but a cost, a fine, excuse me for that. But he said that still wasn't combating the issue. So I was just wondering, and I don't know who can answer this, what's the accountability being held for those fines? Are they being paid? If they're not, what is the, how is that being placed and saying, okay, they didn't pay this, this is the next step? Or what could we do to help stop the false calls and actually put maybe harder accountabilities in place?
Those are two or three different questions. in that
They are, I'm
question,
sorry.
yes.
It was very complex.
I believe in court, we have an objection that goes to a more compound question objection, but there's no one here tonight who can probably answer that question intelligently, but certainly the information about the number of false calls, the number of notices sent out for payment, and then what payments are actually received are all gettable, and we will communicate with both the chief and with the tax enforcement office to get you some hard numbers. After that, the guidance becomes, if this doesn't work, is there some other step to take? And the answer is, I don't know those statistics. I haven't seen anyone who's looked at those numbers, but that would be something to look at if you combine the two. And sometimes when you look at numbers, the sense of it is different when you look at hard numbers than what the anecdotal is. And Mike's office is pretty good about pursuing people they are true tax enforcement people. So.
Okay.
The report says it's 69 for system malfunction and 86 for unintentional tripping and 27 for malicious.
Yeah, I haven't seen that report, so I don't get that report. But then the question is, how many of those notices went out, and what time frame? and how many then result in a payment.
As someone with an alarm system, they send out bills pretty
Right.
promptly.
Well, my old office had an alarm system in it, and, you know, and I've stood there at midnight on the street explaining that it was just set off by accident. So, you know, that stuff happens. I don't know how often they send out the penalty. I don't know if, for example, if you do it once a year, they send a penalty notice out and fine you.
Yeah, they send it with the, like right after the call.
I-
You didn't get one?
It's not my building. I don't know. Not my alarm system. So, but my point is, we'll talk to Mike Hughes and get you data, and they'll get you a sense of it.
And I think that is kind of what I wanted to ask Chief Adderline, because this, you know, I think that's a technological issue, the system malfunction ones.
But they're not our systems.
Right, they're not ours. So like,
Right.
are there things we could do to encourage security systems to help us reduce that number? And then the other one is like physical, right? Like someone tripped or something, they physically accidentally set it off, and that's 86. I mean, so the two biggest ones are unintentional actions, and I don't know how we fix that when it's unintentional.
Councilwoman Rawls, are you completed with your
Oh,
questions?
thank you, Councilman Rodriguez. So, so Mr. Grover, you were saying you could try to,
We'll get you counsel the data.
Okay,
And then
thank you.
people can start drawing conclusions from that.
thank you. That's it, Councilman Rodriguez. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from my fellow colleagues? Councilman Majors?
Yeah, one, and I know the commissioner had this way earlier, and I know we don't have the quarterly report in front of us, but I think it's very evident just the way the first quarter of 2022 is going, that we've seen an increase in gun violence in our city, as well as you know, shootings. So just wanted to know if you would be able to speak to that, and you know, without giving away any information that you know, can't speak about, but what are we doing to try and combat this? I know there's been a few press conferences, but in terms of, you know, where the rubber meets the road, what are we doing to stop the influx of shootings and, quite frankly, you know, opportunities for people to use guns in our community?
Thank you for that question, sir. Yes, there is an uptick in the gun violence. There's a lot of guns out there. We started a campaign back in 2018 of taking guns off the street, because my theory was that the more guns we take out the hands of the people that shouldn't have them, then the opportunity for somebody else getting hurt wouldn't happen. I also noticed back then that the amount of bullets that these people were shooting back and forth, you know, that the potential for collateral damage, what I mean by collateral damage is for innocent people to be hit. And we have a lot of that going on right now. You know, we've been working on it. We're with the ATF, the FBI, Attorney General's task force, Dauphin County's task force, and we are doing everything that we can do to close out the violence. But it's one thing that we don't have. We don't know what gang is arguing with who. We don't know when the next shooting is going to take place. Harrisburg is too small for these guys to be doing things to each other and go meet up at a club or something like that. You know, everybody seems to be beefing. The territory that they used to call theirs is being cut down because of the influx of other nationalities here. So it seems like everybody is arguing over the same turf. It's unfortunate that we have this many homicides this early in the year, 10 of them. It hurts me, it hurts everybody sitting here. I know that we have had conversations about this. I know how deeply that city council cares about this, the mayor and everybody else. And, you know, we're doing everything that we can quite possibly do. And I can tell you this now, we did charge somebody for the Deary Street homicides. He's out in Dauphin County Prison right now, and we're close to charging other people in shootings here. And so we're out there working. It's exhausting my people, but, nobody's giving up on it. The public has helped out. We're hoping to get some more cameras, another bank of cameras in District 5 and District 3. So I'm talking to the mayor about, us finding money in with the county to support that. But, there's a lot of guns out there. There's a lot of work to be done out there. And we're doing things, we're running special details right now. So, there's a lot going on. There's other things going on that I can't share with you. But, we're not just sitting around and not doing anything about this here. We are out there trying, and we will continue to try, but we need the help of everybody. If you see something, say something. We have ways of making it so that nobody finds out, that you're even talking to us now. So it's unfortunate, but things will change, and Harrisburg will be a great capital city like it should be. And I just wanted to say, this is for the CSAs. I know that Chardin, she gets mad at me because I have to pull the CSAs because security out at Harrisburg High School, they don't show up. They don't show up. So, they want to use our CSAs because they are able to talk to the kids and, knock down some of the nonsense that is going on out there. Right now, things are, to the point where I'm putting the CSA in actual danger because I'm sure that you have all heard about all the fighting that is going on out there in the different situations. I'm not talking bad about Harrisburg High School or anybody out there, but something must be done. And I keep telling the high school, we had a shooting at a high school today. I think it was Erie. Something must be done. Because if they think that it can't happen here, they're absolutely wrong. And I want to put police officers in that high school. But that's something that nobody wants to talk about right now. That's something that is not a popular subject with Harrisburg residents right now. That's all that I have, sir.
All right. Thank you for sharing. I know before you came back in, President Bowers and I were just talking with Ms. Houston about the program that I guess is in a pilot phase. If there are ways that we can provide either interventions or additional assistance with the school district, I would encourage us to try to formalize whatever kind of agreement that is so that we can get the proper number of CSAs. At one point, we do know the city and the school district had a relationship where there was funding for our community response officers. Don't know his rank anymore, but Mr. Hammer was one of them, and some others that were working with our school district. So one of the things that I think all of us are worried about is the uptick of violence in our community, and how do we provide additional resources to be able to prevent that. So whatever either interventions or additional assistance that can be provided, please let us know so that we can work with the administration on finding ways to tackle it. I think there are a multitude of ways to try to address this issue. It's not all just with police officers, but there needs to be a whole community approach to deal with this because this is affecting every neighborhood in our community. And working with our public safety departments is one way that we can help it, but working with our nonprofits and other organizations that are out here trying to do the work on the street and alongside you can help to try to prevent these issues from occurring further. With the amount of violence that we're already seeing, I know there's a lot of concern about what that means for the rest of the year. So thank you for that, and look forward to working with you. Thank you, Chair Rodriguez.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilman. Are there any further questions? I'm not hearing any, Commissioner. Thank you.
I was just gonna say a quick, as you sit here and you start to run through all the things, your daily routine. The CSAs, we have created a brochure that I'd be happy to share with all of council. It's also in Spanish as well. I will say just my hope and my desire would be to see more CSAs that are bilingual. And so hopefully, by the end of the year, once you guys see the reports and have all those statistics and what you need in your hand, you'll see the value to the CSA's hold and see that there's a greater need to add and add in a positive way. So,
And just for clarity, you said you're currently down a CSA?
yes,
Okay.
unfortunately, he hurt himself, so.
Okay. Thank you. Once again, thank you for joining us, Commissioner. Thank you, Chief Enderline. Appreciate your time. And with that being said, Mr. Petrowski, would you be able to read Resolution 20 of 2022 into the record?
Yes, Resolution 20 of 2022 is a resolution authorizing the city of Harrisburg to negotiate and enter into a professional services agreement with the Research Foundation of the City of University of New York on behalf of the National Network for Safe Communities at John Jay College to provide consulting services to help reduce gun violence in Harrisburg.
Thank you for that. Is someone here from the administration to give us an overview?
Yes.
Thank you.
It'll be myself, and I'll let her introduce herself, but my colleague as well.
Good evening, Council. My name is Adrienne Hoffman-Lewis. I'm a crime analyst within the Community Services Division at the Harrisburg Bureau of Police.
So Adrian's just going to give you a little brief history of this specific contract as it pertains to a greater picture, which is the grant that we received from PCCD, which is the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, that we were officially awarded last week. We are proud to say that. And like I said, I'll allow Adrian to give a little brief history of that grant. We will have to come back before you with the actual grant, hopefully soon. But as it pertains again to this specific contract, she'll give you a little history of the grant and then tie it into the contract.
So we had applied last year for an initial funding request in October. And in early December, it was announced that we had formally received the grant. Our understanding was that we were only going to formally apply in December. So I do apologize that this hasn't come before you until now. But that was sort of the timeline of the grant and how that's come into play. And then, of course, Council's been busy with budgetary concerns, et cetera. So as Director Houston mentioned, we'll be definitely bringing that before you again to ratify for the grant. It is a $500,000 grant. It is to combat group violence here in the city of Harrisburg. So particularly this year, as you've mentioned, the numbers have gone up quite a bit with the homicides and the shootings in the city. So we are hoping that this group violence intervention strategy that the National Network for Safe Communities has pioneered. They started this in about the mid-90s. You may have heard of Operation Ceasefire in Boston. That's kind of how it started. So over the last 30 years, they have refined their strategy to decrease group violence within many cities throughout the United States. The Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency has funded GVI strategy for a couple different sites. York City is currently working on the GVI strategy. Is what they call it. Sorry, group violence intervention strategy. Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, I believe, all are implementing this strategy to try and decrease group violence within their communities. It is an evidence-based approach, and it's endorsed as an effective program by the National Gang Center. The approach is basically focused deterrence. So you are identifying the group members that are committing the violence, speaking with them through the community, through law enforcement, through social services, through voices within their community, to let them know that the violence is not acceptable any longer, and that we want them to stop, and that we have resources available if they're interested in stopping, and sort of assisting them with following through with the resources, with finding those resources. So the contract itself is a 2-year contract with the national network. It is $210,000 of the $500,000 grant. The contract would be for 2 years from the date that we are able to sign the contract with them. It includes a lot of technical assistance and strategic advisement from them. There's what they call their GVI University. This is a workshop that will educate our key partners. Like I said, law enforcement, social services, and then of course our community leaders on the core components of the strategy. They do a virtual problem analysis. So that's a deep dive into the street violence dynamics in our city. They will provide us with, after that, they'll provide us with an implementation plan that'll have concrete actionable steps that we can take to implement the strategy. And then they provide intensive strategic advisement over those 2 years. So although the grant will run through 2023 and our payments to them, if approved, will run through 2023, we will still have this 2-year contract with them, which would run through May or June or whatever of 2024. So they are committed to that full 2 years of when we start the contract. They also have a lot of management and development tools, a lot of ongoing training that they provide, topic-specific workshops. And then one of the other key things that they connect us to other peer sites. So other cities that are experiencing a similar problem may have similar resources, and enabling that kind of peer collaboration and learning opportunities.
Right, thank you for that. Before I go around for any questions, I have a few statements as well. If you're able to answer them, I'd appreciate that. I'm glad you brought up York and Baltimore, because I actually researched that myself, and their GVI program is not going too well. They're still having a consistent issue with murders and shootings, specifically in York, specifically in a school just about last week. And in Baltimore, the ceasefire initiative failed poorly, according to their own dispatch. And they rarely share that initially that is like the pull to come in, but then Baltimore spending an additional $415,000 and York spending an additional $600,000 just to enforce or to start what was recommended by the organization. And majority of it, I went to the website. It's rather confusing for the simple fact of they say on one page of the training that traditional social services are not adequate for the GVI population, but on the very same context, but a different pamphlet, they say why offering social service matters and is important. So in 1 minute, they're saying that those confounds would not help a criminal, be better re-entrant into community, but on the very same breath, they're saying it would. So even in their language, it's rather confusing. But what I gathered is there's an initiative where the police department forms with local nonprofits and agencies, and they go door to door pretty much, and they identify who they seem to be a gun, let's say, more willing to commit a gun crime than others, and then they confront them. If there is a shooting instead of an arrest, there's a kind of, don't do that again, and these are things we can help you not do that again, instead of, arresting the individuals that can commit murders or more severe crimes. Also, through my research, I found out that the areas that those programs started in, domestic violence and child deaths have actually risen, because when there's a domestic dispute and the group comes to the home, they will not arrest or take the perpetrator. It's a coaching, don't do that again. Once they leave, they're still leaving those individuals in that home. So there has definitely been an uptick in the areas where that specifically was taking place. Just want to really, keep that in mind, especially in our area. It could really be detrimental, especially with the way the schooling is going. Our youth really just don't need to be a part of that. But I did have a few more questions for you. With the current complement issue that we're having with the department, how do we see we'll be able to break off a substantial amount of officers to partner with nonprofits to make that possible.
So obviously, we were hoping that the consultant could give us a little bit more information once they come in and do their
Okay.
problem analysis. But my understanding is the enforcement is before the fact. So a lot of the strategy is to get ahead of the violence by offering those group members the resources that are available.
On the website, though, it also says during, so when there is a crime committed, the new approach would be not to arrest per se that individual, but more of a coaching. I mean, it's on the website specific.
But we would have to decide.
Oh, their website, absolutely. And I can give you the pamphlets. I'll email it to you as well. I can also pull up a few videos from other councils from Baltimore and Louisville who actually attested to that. Oh, the specific, I can give you the website, absolutely.
The National
Not a
Networks
problem.
website? 'Cause they have a-
nnscommunities.org. That's the National Network for Safe Families of John Jay College, who we are talking about going into an agreement with.
The National Network for Safe Communities
Yes,
at
ma'am.
John Jay College. Yes,
Yep.
they have a couple different programs. Yep, but this is specific to the group violence intervention program.
Yeah, that is the
Okay.
specific. That's the model they go after. Actually, you can download the guided PDF from their
Mhm.
website, which I did both, and
Yeah.
I got this information from them specifically. I just wanted to kind of make you aware of that as well. It's not per se gunshot surveillance. There's no personal modification. It's accountable for itself. But as opposed to this model, whoever we empower, whether it's a nonprofit or individual, there's no real back end check-in. So from what I'm gathering, other councils have been waiting months just for a report back on certain incidents and what has happened. So there's no like back end reporting. And it could take up to a year to hear any updates. So these are just issues that other neighboring cities have had. So I just wanted to bring that up. But then also that could potentially provide criminal operations in the area to grow. If they know I'll get a slap on the hand for perhaps doing something as detrimental as that, I can continue what I'm doing.
Yeah, I don't understand.
This is the,
Yeah, I understand that, and I've looked
unless
through
I'm
their
referring to
guide.
the wrong organization, that is the organization.
So that's correct. Councilman Rodriguez, I understand what he's saying a little bit. Councilman Rodriguez, I definitely appreciate the research you're doing. I think what Ms. Hoffman Lewis is, or really what we're trying to get at is that the consultant isn't here yet. And so it's not what you see on the website and what the consultant will provide for Harrisburg will
Well, they have
ultimately
a
be-
template that they use nationwide. And there's even a council in Louisville who said not every city has an Ahmaud issue or perhaps, a lot of the uprisings such as that. So it's hard to replicate the same model city to city because the
Absolutely.
gun, violence doesn't replicate that way. Unfortunately, we would have to do really deep diving digging to really find out the issue. I don't think we'd be able to efficiently mimic a model that's happening elsewhere because Harrisburg has its own genetic code in our own way. We're not a monolith as much as people may suggest or think. But these are testaments that I've looked up, according to the resolution and other councils. And I'm not saying it's 100% ineffective, but I just would love to learn how it could work. Because if we're going to these doors and we're giving offers of, let's say, mental health services instead of incarceration, I'm not saying I'm against that or for that. I just posed the question of how would the neighbor feel or how unsafe would the neighbor feel knowing that this just happened next door? And, just questions I have as a resident, but I'll pause mine for a moment and I will.
If I
pass
could
it.
say something, sir?
Absolutely, yep.
When the administrators come in and they train us on, what to do, we understand, that we have to adapt the program to fit Harrisburg's needs. We are not going to hug somebody who abused a little baby or harmed a child or anything like that. So I don't know what they're doing
That's
elsewhere.
that's
I can't speak for like Baltimore.
Yep.
I do know that when you go to like Baltimore now, you could be the subject of a street robbery.
Yep.
And they slap people with a little fine or something like that, a citation, but we're far from Baltimore and it's not going to happen here.
Well, I'm just, according to the information you guys give, so even addressing trauma, the structure will recognize, honor, and address trauma, developing treatment resources, cognitive behavior, post-homicide support. So instead of incarceration, I give you therapy. That's literally the model they go after.
Well, they may go after that model, but it doesn't mean that we have to go along with that model.
Okay, I mean, but that's what that intervention stands for. So I don't know how that would work, us battling people we're paying ideally to coach us on something, saying we're not gonna go with it. I just feel we could really put a lot of those resources to getting more great officers on the street and supporting the city. But I would definitely digress for the time being, and I can pass it to my far end, right, to Councilwoman Rawls.
Thank you, Chair Rodriguez. Some of the questions Chair Rodriguez did also ask in a way. I wanted to know what type of resources that they would be providing. You had mentioned resources, and I just wanted to know what kind those would be.
Those are listed in their contract under Exhibit A, the scope of services, but that would include the Group Violence Intervention University, the site-specific interventions, the strategic advising, looking specifically at what the problem is in Harrisburg, what resources we might already have available, and if not, suggestions on what resources we might need in order to effectively implement the strategy.
Okay. I'll probably have some follow-up questions, but that was one that glared out about the resources. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Rodriguez.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
I guess I just have to make a clarification, be very clear. Councilman Rodriguez, your understanding of the strategy is not my understanding of the strategy.
Yeah, I think we should all dive deeper in it because I'm reading directly from it. And instead of direct incarceration, they give what is called notifications. So they will send a digital notification to the offender. And then they even have a check-in process. This is all from their website. And you could even research further, go to YouTube pages where council members from other cities that participate are giving both the good and bad. My apologies, Councilman Madison.
So our understanding of how the strategy works is actually opposite. It's we go to the people who we find out who are committing these sort of crimes, these sort of disturbances in the city. And we say, not only is the community tired of it, but if you don't cooperate at this point, we're going to have to hit you with federal charges. So it really is the buy-in of from a federal, from a state, and from a local level. It's really not the opposite of letting, quite frankly, people who are involved in high gang and group violence, letting them go with a slap on the wrist. My understanding is it's actually quite the opposite. It's to go after them if they're not willing to. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and it's not based specifically for individuals as well. It's the group as a whole. So we're not just saying if you commit another shooting, we're gonna hit you harder with these charges. We're gonna go after your entire group because the community is tired of this. So it's getting that community buy-in as well to tell the group members that they're not going to stand for the violence any longer.
I appreciate your translation of it. That's just not how the website and the actual organization reads, nor does the initiatives that the cities that engaged in it read. If anyone wouldn't mind, I can play a video from actual council expressing their concerns through the microphone, or I can continue read. But this is just the information I was given to research. And I mean, literally, as I read right here, let's see, giving them, okay, so Officer Keith Talley told members they've been meeting with those responsible for the gun violence, giving them notifications since April. That's specific from Baltimore. So it's not really a check and balance of, do better, you'll get a federal charge. It's really trying to work with the offenders, which I understand. But I just feel the community and the residents should know a bit more about this specific initiative. But I won't take up too much time. Councilman Madsen, did you have any?
Guess it's a little hard to ask questions when it seems like candidly the chair and the presenters aren't really talking about the same program, it sounds like. So My advice, I think, would be maybe to work with Councilman Rodriguez and his concerns, and questions, and make sure, I guess, the understanding or everybody's on the same page. I will try to ask questions based off the information that's been presented. And so for me, it's all about day-to-day application. So, and I guess this is the question for the commissioner. When you have an officer that's in their vehicle, how does this program help them do their job? Or what is it going to do, make life easier for them and the residents?
Well, hopefully it'll be an opportunity for the officer, if he's with a CIT person or with somebody from John Jay College, to get out there and to meet people, to find out what these people need, what sort of resources that they need. It'll be an opportunity for that officer to walk up to some kids and see what they need to meet, families and everything else. Everybody, it's really funny, to hear the different conversations because people want to be soft on crime and then they want to be hard on crime. You got to be somewhere in the middle. We're not saying, let crime run rampant or anything like that, but there are some people out there that have some real needs and, you got to find out what these people need and how you can help them. So, John Jay College, through their training, they may train my officers to look for certain things, to ask certain questions and what have you, I don't think it's a bad program. Is it the end all stop all program? Probably not. Because people's situations change daily, but I think it's an excellent start. I think that if we can reach a couple kids through this program, then the program works.
Yeah, and just as a follow-up question, just to give an example, so people get into crime for various different reasons. And, a lot of it's related to poverty. Now, we may come across a resident that is struggling with addiction, and they have a small amount of a hard narcotic, versus somebody that may be selling it and has an illegal weapon but they're not intending to use it. They simply have it for protection because of work that they're doing. And then 3, you may just have somebody that does have the weapon that has the intent to use it to harm someone. With this data in this program, how would that help, I guess, an officer siphon off between, and I'm just giving out 3, I'm sure there's multiple ones that you're aware of in these scenarios, but I guess how does this program or this data help an officer understand the different scenarios and the proper response to them?
Officers respond to different calls daily. They can read people, they can look at people, you can tell who's up to no good. You can tell, who's going to use a weapon to further the enterprise that they're currently in. A person who's down and out on their luck and they just happen to be a user, due to some injury or opioid addiction or something like that, a prescription drug, their demeanor is different. So naturally, you're going to use the resources of John Jay College, to try to help these people. The other people, anytime, you're carrying a weapon because you're dealing drugs, then you're enhancing that business that you're in. And that's a totally different level of dealing with these people.
And I'd like to say that a big part of the strategy is facilitating that intelligence between different agencies. So between the Harrisburg Bureau of Police and federal agencies, between probation and parole, between other local agencies, so that we know the difference between those 3 individuals and which is the one that the strategy should be geared towards. And it's the group violence members. So will it decrease all of the shootings? No, of course not. There's many different reasons for them. But I agree with the Commissioner, if we can decrease some of them, then I think it's certainly worth a try.
Then final question is Dauphin County, last I checked, still has the highest recidivism rate in Pennsylvania at about 80%. So we know if we can do preventative things to stop someone from reoffending, it would likely cause less criminal behavior in our community. Does this study, or will that be able to do anything to address folks that may be on the cusp of reoffending, to do something preventative so they don't reoffend or get antisocial behavior?
I think it Depends on whether or not they're identified as a group
Okay.
member by the deep dive into the analysis of kind of what's going on in the city. I will say that I think every city is different in their implementation. What might not work in Baltimore might work here. This is York City is in their 4th year of the GVI strategy, and they have used a lot of the tools that they've learned from the national network to kind of pivot their strategy to work a little bit more with youth because they're having a problem with youth being involved. So
York's had it since 2016.
I was under the impression when we met with
Yeah.
them, it said 2018. So, I mean, we went down and met with York, quite candidly. I mean, and they said they gave us totally different, I guess, results from what Mr. Rodriguez is reading. So I guess I really have no comment for what is being stated.
And I think our hope is that after we've worked with the national network, some of the strategies that they have given us might be effective in either working with youth or in preventative services. We're certainly, we've had some just preliminary conversations with a lot of the key stakeholders that would be involved. And everybody is very interested in tackling this problem together. So I think we've had conversations with Dauphin County Human Services, and I think, they've got some initiatives that they're kind of working on. And so I think everybody's kind of working in this space together. And it would be great if we could just kind of all do it, in one fell swoop as much as possible.
Because to your point, that Harrisburg's a small community, if you offend and then you go back home and you're around the same environment and the same group of people, it seems very likely that you would get back into the same behaviors that put you in incarceration in the first place. So that's sort of, I guess, but just sort of like, that's sort of the concern, I guess, there is just how we can do some more of those preventative things to just stop the behavior.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. And I think if we're able to identify our resources that are here and start working with some of the partners that are already, like I said, already kind of working in this space, I think we're all hopeful that we may be able to prevent some of these things ahead of time.
Yeah, and then on the side is, we know that one of the ways you can do that is getting people into jobs and career pathways, especially they're way less likely to reoffend, especially within that first 6 months of them coming back home. So I would encourage, in addition to this study, just finding if there are those opportunities, like PAC has the STEP program, for example. There's a number of nonprofits out there doing work in this space. So mentorship, all that type of stuff. So we can work with our nonprofit communities that are doing this work as well, in connection with the study. So.
And Mr. Masson, my understanding is that this program would bring resources together. Instead of having, everybody scattered all over the place, to just be under the umbrella of just one organization where, it'd be like one-stop shopping. We have to go back to the 90s when Bill Clinton, those guys, they came up with like fixing broken windows, and they locked up everybody for everything. It didn't work. So we have to offer people opportunities, so that we can help them, because we have intelligent, talented youth out there, but they feel that nobody loves them. It's hard, as what to walk out of your front door and look down on the ground and see a needle, an empty casing, a boarded up house next door. And those kids feel, well, who really cares for me? Who's going to help me out? So this is an opportunity for us to to try to give resources to people that need them. I believe in helping people out, especially once. And after that, then.
Thank you.
Just want to say a large part of the grant, to my understanding, in our conversations and the countless meetings that we've had, is that the goal is for all of these entities to work together. And to have a seat at the table. It seems like, again, everybody seems to kind of be doing and working towards the same end, but everyone's in their own little bubble. And so the goal is to expand that bubble so that everyone, again, can have a seat at the table, but be effective seat at the table. And really, that's what my understanding, honestly, is of this grant and of this strategy, is to get the buy-in from the community, from the community members and leaders, and from those that are fed up and those who we're also having issues with. And getting people to stand up and take a stand for the community that they live and thrive in. It's working with, again, the social services, the nonprofits who are out here working day in and day out to help, ex-offenders get back into the workforce and different things, offering different workshops and different trade schools and certifications. So really it's getting everyone to see the need for us to all work together as a team to try to end some of these group violence, gang violence, and the need for individuals to feel that they have to be a part of such a dangerous group. There's a reason that they feel that they have to be a part of such a group. And so it's getting to the heart of the matter, like we said, of why they feel they need to be a part of this group. What are they lacking, so that we can hopefully be a resource to them. And if we can't be a resource to them, offer another place that can be a resource to them. And then after we've exhausted our resources, if they choose to go out back into this life, then we're saying, then we have no choice but to go after you for the crimes that you've committed. I mean, and we have to hold someone accountable. And at this point, not only do we have to hold ourselves because we're part of the community, but we have to hold the people that are committing these crimes over and over again. But if we can, like I said, shift and change the mentality and change the culture, that's a huge part of it. I think it's changing the mentality of a culture, and that a life that exists beyond just what they see. And so, again, like I said, my understanding of the strategy and of the grant is to do that, is to bring all the entities together to have these conversations and have, quite honestly, these hard conversations. These aren't easy conversations to be had at the end of the day. We're talking about people's lives. We're talking about people's families, people's sons and daughters. And nobody wins. When someone loses their life in gun violence, nobody wins. Not the person who lost their life and not the person who committed the crime. Because quite frankly, they're always looking over their back, correct? So there's always something that they feel they have to prove or have to defend. And so to me, the reality is the only way for us to try to aim at fixing anything is to do just that, is to try. So PCCD has been wanting to give Harrisburg this money for this strategy for years, to our understanding from the conversations that we've had. So the fact that it was sought after and went after, they were happy to the fact that we had finally reached out to seek this money again under this strategic evidence-based plan. So
One last thing, just because you mentioned it, there's a concept, the Capital Region United Way did it. I just happened to know because when I was working there, we were doing it. It's a term called collective impact. And so the idea is that in nonprofit space, especially, you always have these different entities trying to tackle a problem, let's say hunger. There's 8 or 9, 10 government nonprofit agencies, and none of them know that they exist.
Right.
And they're competing for the same resources. So what other communities have done is they brought everybody in the room and said, all right, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? Who's not doing anything about this? And that has been a good way for nonprofits to work collaboratively and share resources and make a bigger impact. So I strongly encourage you. It sounds like that's kind of philosophy you're looking to do, is to reach out to the Capital Region United Way, because they did a whole study, sat down with the various players, and I think they've come out with some pretty good results. So
thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Green.
Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez. I think some of what I was going to ask was kind of answered. I was kind of going to ask for an overview of the grant itself. And was this strategy specifically written into the grant? And if not, then how do we get to this point? But it sounds like it was specifically written into the grant itself. And so the funding is specifically for this strategy. It can't be used for anything else. All right. I think that's an important point to get across, especially for the public, because I know some people will be like, well, if we've got this much money, we need to give it to this organization and this organization. And then it gets broken up into pieces. But if the money is specifically allocated for something, I think it's important for people to understand that it's for this strategy. Listening to Councilman Rodriguez and some of the concerns that he brought, I think it would be great for us to hear directly from the consultant or the organization that will be doing this project itself, because they can give a little more in-depth explanation of how things work, and how the strategy itself would be developed with Harrisburg and how it would be tailored to Harrisburg, and maybe which stakeholders they're looking or may have already identified in our community And so that's something I'd like to see before I could vote. Obviously, this is a workshop meeting, not a legislative meeting. But before we would get to that point, I'd love to hear directly from the consultant just to get firsthand knowledge instead of basing it off of, what so-and-so might have said here or what we might find online. I think that's the best way to do it. Looks like you have something to say.
No, certainly, Councilwoman Green, you raised a number of great points, and procedurally, we would have had the grant before you guys to take a look at, and a lot of the initial questions we could have discussed then. Right now, we have, because of how fast things went, we actually had to get the contract before you, and we're looking to get the grant in front of you as well, where you'll see that they had to put the GVI strategy, and also to normally the contractor would be here for that. So hopefully, and we'll work together on this, perhaps when we have the grant itself in front of you to be ratified, we can have you guys answer those questions, but that's just a procedural point.
All right, as far as the sensitivity of this, is this something that needs to be passed before we see the grant, or is it something that can hold off until we see the grant?
No,
It's almost like putting what is it, the cart before the
cart,
horse,
yes.
right?
So
Like we're passing a contract
it-
before we have a grant in front of us.
So the contract, the contract itself that you guys receive, it's substantially similar to what the final contract would be. However, it's not, certainly there are some revisions that still need to be made to it. So I would say that. I don't know whether there's a specific timeline.
Yeah, I mean, there's no specific timeline, but we can't spend any of the grant money until we have the consultant in here, because until they come here and do their problem analysis and talk to all of the parties available, they start with law enforcement, like I said, probation, parole, so that we can identify what the violence looks like in Harrisburg and who are these major players. They're not going to be able to offer us any resources or suggestions. More than likely, we will be the experts in what is here in Harrisburg, resource-wise. They can say, well, you'll need this, 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 and this, but we'll be the ones that will be asking the community members for their trusted nonprofit organizations and the partners that they trust to do the work.
Great, which brings me to my next point or question, which is that it seems like we provide the data and they just analyze it. How are we looking to gather that data? I know sometimes when it comes to getting certain reports and things from the police department, it's kind of like, well, this system doesn't link with this system, or we can't provide this much, or we need to analyze this, or you can't get it right now, essentially, right? It's going to take time. So what are we doing preemptively? Say we pass it and they come in tomorrow, what do we have? Where are we getting this information from? Because that'll go into my third point, which is turnaround time. Violence is happening now. And if we're talking about, well, we'll gather the data and we'll talk to some people, and when we get the system in order, we'll get some numbers, and then they can't do anything to analyze it until we get that to them. It's kind of like it's out there, but nothing can be done. So what resources do we have to make sure we can get this data as fast as possible, and where are we getting it from? Which community groups have we already identified? If we were officially awarded it in December, what have we done from December to now to prepare us for today? Because it's here in front of us, and if we pass it, it's kind of like, and then what?
My understanding is it takes probably about 3 to 5 months for the strategy to be implemented, because you've got to get everybody to the table. In regards to the statistics and the problem analysis that they're going to do, as a crime analyst in the Community Services Division, I do actually look through a lot of our statistics. You're correct. A lot of the systems don't talk to each other. There's a lot of cleaning that I'm doing, but I do have a lot of the data. I know how to pull the data from our system, so I can certainly work with them on that. They also will be, like I said, talking with our detectives, our patrol officers, probation, parole, and it's not just the hard data, how many shootings and where were they and all of that, but it's also just the street knowledge that our detectives and our probation and parole have. They will probably know who a lot of these players are, a lot of these group members that we need to target with this strategy. And so it's kind of just bringing them all to the table and having conversations over that. It's having these open conversations that we either aren't able to or don't always have.
All right. I would.
And when it comes to the different gangs and what have you. Probation has that information, juvenile probation, adult probation. They can tell you all other gang members and when they joined, when they got out, when they moved up to the next gang. The city doesn't keep data like that, but we can get it through the county. So they will provide a lot of information along with Mr. Chardo's office, DA's office, DAG's office.
And we've had quite a few meetings and conversations with them, and they're very interested in this strategy and working with us and trying to keep violence here.
All right. I guess one thing I can say is I'd like for us to start gathering the information now. Start being preemptive, start having these conversations. We've got technology. Someone doesn't have to transcribe it. We can record it so that when the consultants come in, we're not then having the meetings. Because if it's a 2-year timeline, and understand that they'll provide some consultation or, some assistance afterwards. But if we're looking for a 3 to 5 month turnaround, if we're looking for a 2-year timeline when they're being paid by us, it's important for us to have the information as soon as possible so they can hit the ground running. Because I'm working on the comprehensive plan. I know how 2 years can turn to 10 years. When it comes to information gathering, it's like, oh, okay, well, these are generations and generations sometimes of individuals who are involved, and they might have gotten involved at young ages and moved up ranks, and they're connected from so-and-so, and this incident happened. And you could be talking about 20, 30 years worth of information that you're trying to fit into a small timeline. And starting to have those conversations preemptively now will help us to get that information. It sounds like we know who to talk to, right? It sounds like we know where to start at. The question is, why haven't we started? Because we can see what's going on in our community. We can see the impact and effect that it's having now. And so it's kind of disheartening to go, well, we know where to start. We just haven't started because we haven't decided on this grant, or we just got this grant. Some of this is things that can be done without this grant money. These conversations need to be being had all the time, right? We need to be looking at maybe setting up forums to meet on a weekly, monthly basis with these different organizations to bring the conversations together so that we can start having that interagency communication, so that when the time comes to analyze it, but we've got smart people here, we can analyze things, right? We know what's going on. Our officers on the streets, they know what's going on. And so now it's like, which strategies are we putting in place? I understand that this is one method, one strategy to put in place, but there are hundreds and thousands of different anti-violence strategies that are being put in place all over the country right now. And so I think until we start getting the information in one place and talking about it, instead of talking about it in silos, we're never going to really address it. Whether it's nonprofits having the conversations with our officers, we need to all do it together. It's all these different silos, and it sounds like it could be a promising strategy in some ways, but it also just seems like a lot of information gathering and analyzing. What happens once we analyze the information, we implement some of it, but unfortunately you see so many things that come into place and then nothing happens with it. It's a document on a shelf. We implement a couple of things here. We have some turnover in officers, we have some turnover in leadership, and we're back to square one. And I guess, I kind of become emotional with it because it's like looking at our community, looking at, we've got kids being shot. We've got shootings every day. Someone was just shot at the end of my block. And you just look and go every single day. And then we'll start talking about it in 3 to 5 months. We'll start talking about it once the contract's signed. Why aren't we talking about it now? We can have press conferences. How come we aren't having meetings with agencies to get things done? And I'm sure, I'm not trying to put it on anyone saying we're not doing anything. But I just look and go, how come the things that we're talking about in here, they don't seem like they're expensive? The contracts here, they can be expensive. It's about $215,000 in total, right? 210. That's a little pricey, but a lot of the things that are being done here aren't pricey. Having conversations, it's not pricey. Gathering the information is not pricey. And I'd like to see us starting to do that even before they come, so that when they come, we're using them as a resource to the best of our ability. So that was kind of a long rant, but I think I got the point there.
And one of the great things about the strategy is, as Director Houston said, we've spoken with York and they've let us sit in on, there's quarterly call-ins. That's where you're working with the group members. You've got law enforcement, probation, parole, community members, talking with the group members, but then there's also weekly shooting reviews. So every week, you're working on that interagency communication, and I know that we have a strategy. It's not this strategy, and we're hoping that this strategy might help with some of that so that the officers are free to work on other calls on other issues, whether it's domestic violence or other calls that are coming through.
Thank you. And then just one last thing, I'd like to see a long-term plan, how this is going to be built into the system. You know, how this communication is going to continue to be built into the system so that when we're long gone, when there are more people here who have better ideas, that we can still see some of the things that we learned built in, not that it's just a passing phase. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Green. Councilwoman Bowers.
Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez, and thank you for being here tonight. Thanks for clarifying the timeline. I think that was helpful. In the interest of time, I just wanted to note two things. I wanted to clarify the term. So it's for 24 months, and it's noted that it began April 1st, 2022 through March 31st of 2024.
Yeah, well, it hasn't started, obviously.
Well, I know, but
yes.
I'm just saying what's in front of us now because you mentioned 2023, so or something. So I wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, so the grant is through the end of 2023. So any payments to them, we would make through the end of 2023
Okay.
because the grant is, you know, a portion of that obviously is specific to this contract.
Sure.
But yes, the
Thank
work
you.
with them would be for 2 years.
Thank you for clarifying. I missed that, the grant ends in 2023. The other thing I just wanted to bring to council members' attention, I think it might be helpful as we move forward with this discussion. On page 11 of the actual agreement, Exhibit A, it mentions the scope of services and it discusses what would be done here in Harrisburg, not Baltimore, not York, not Pittsburgh or Philadelphia. I think it's helpful if we remain focused on the scope of services here. I understand the broader view is nice, but Baltimore is not Harrisburg. So I think we should just be mindful of that. And again, that's on page 11, Exhibit A. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Majors.
Yes, thank you. Most of the questions that I did have were asked, but just a couple follow-ups. So in there, they mentioned about having an individual or a project manager, a group manager here hired locally. Is that someone that they're going to hire from Harrisburg, or is that someone they provide from John Jay?
That will probably come before you at some point as well. We did bake in the cost for a project manager to be hired through the grant. It would be a grant funded position with the hope that the strategy would be successful and we could then absorb those costs into the budget.
So that's a part of the larger $500,000 grant, not outside of the 210.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So
yes,
that's
that would be somebody that we would be looking for.
okay. And then in terms of the resources, in terms of I guess their field directors or managers, do we know how many people would be working on the Harrisburg intervention GVI strategy?
I feel like I have that information. I don't want to misspeak and speak falsely, but they did give us a number. I want to say they said for our team, it was going to be 5 to 7 of their team, research team on our, just for specific for Harrisburg, but I could be wrong and that number could be low.
Okay.
But yes, I believe they said 5 to 7.
Okay. And then the 3 to 5 months, that's for the data gathering and then implementation, or that is just for an implementation of a strategy? Because those two things are separate in my.
Right, exactly. I'm not sure exactly how long the problem analysis would take. I think they said maybe a few weeks, just for them to really do that deep dive, go back and then kind of put everything together. The 3 to 5 months, my understanding was that's what it normally will take a city to get the structure set up. So to get everybody at the table, to get all the major players identified and on board, and then setting up the project manager for them to have enough training so that they can kind of help, facilitate all of these conversations. And then the work is really truly beginning.
Okay, and then in terms of, I understand the work that John Jay has done previously. How was that organization selected? I mean, I'm sure there are other organizations nationally that do similar types of work. Was John Jay selected because of the grant, or, I mean, I'm sure there's not just one group doing community and group violence interventions.
Specifically to this strategy, it is. They're the pioneers of this strategy. So, yes.
There are other similar strategies, but theirs is unique in that it includes law enforcement. A lot of the other strategies are community and social service based, and this includes the law enforcement arm.
Okay. And then, just so we're clear, because we didn't, I mean, it was mentioned, and I guess now that we do have crime analysts on board in the city, I think trying to be able to gather some of the other data and having it in-house could be beneficial as we're looking at this. I mean, hearing that we don't collect our own data in terms of, gangs and other pieces, and that's at the county level, but the relationship between the city and the county just needs to be good in order for those things to occur. And then just taking a brief look at the county probation site, it seems to be a couple of years behind in terms of what data is publicly available to residents. So I won't belabor the point, but want to make sure that we're having those conversations as my colleagues have previously mentioned. Then I guess look forward to hearing what the other uses are for that $500,000, since we have just a little over a year and a half left to spend down those funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Majors. Councilwoman Daniels.
So just a few points of clarification. So this is 210,000 out of a $500,000 grant. And if this portion isn't accepted, do we lose the other portion, or do we just lose this portion of the 500,000 altogether?
The grant is specific to implementing the GVI strategy.
The entire 500.
Yes, yes. So, and we would just be using the 210 for this piece of the contract, right? We have the rest set aside for some other things, hopefully.
Then, and if we're dissatisfied with the services, we have 30 days to give John Jay 30 days notice if we're not satisfied. Do you know how theoretically that would work? Like if we 1 year into the program, or
So we're not there yet. That's why this is a negotiate and enter into. There's a number of terms in their form contract that would be unacceptable to the city on a regular basis.
such
So
as?
it's governed by the state of New York. They have to agree to us to cancel the contract, things like that. We would not sign a contract that has those kind of things. It contradicts for example, the cancellation for convenience, which is our convenience, not someone signing and saying we agree it's your convenience. But those are things we always negotiate or contracts. So, but that's where we won't have an answer to that question until we get to the other side of negotiation. But there would be recommendations that a law bureau would make that say you can't sign a contract unless this term is gone. That's the reality of it.
And then, so under the contract, every person who works under this contract is an employee of the contractor. So does that mean that the people who work on this strategy, the city employee side, they would be absorbing the other portion of that 500,000 contract?
No, so the fee for the 210 is just for the contractors from the national network. We do have a portion set aside for the project manager because we'll need one full time, and that'll have to be grant funded. Obviously, the budget's already passed. And then we have some other funds set aside for if we need officer overtime for any of the enforcement actions. I think we have some put aside for other resources that might come up.
And just to echo Solicitor Grover's sentiments so typically with our contracts, we will have a provision that is a great question, Councilwoman Daniels. Typically in our contracts, we have a specific provision. It's a boilerplate provision, but essentially saying called independent contractors, independent parties, where the city of Harrisburg and whoever our contract, we're operating as independent parties. Neither is an employee of the other. They're providing a service to us and we're directing them with respect to how those services come to us and paying them, et cetera, et cetera. Really, the most important piece of this contract, of the document in front of you guys, is Exhibit A of the contract. We wanted to get this down to you as fast as possible so you would have a complete understanding of the services that the contractor is providing us. With respect to the contract terms and conditions themselves, we're still negotiating those. We're really still, I mean, not that it's going to be too long or cumbersome, but that's, for lack of a better word, that's going to be the legal back and forth. But for your purposes, definitely Exhibit A is the most important piece of this.
So what you're saying is the language in terms of, I guess, who's overseeing, that will be sorted out.
That I can say that will be sorted out and definitively as with all of our, whenever we hire professional services, ultimately the buck stops with the city. We are, if we're hiring someone for a service, we are their boss because we're paying them. So they can recommend to us, but ultimately we determine what happens.
All right, thank you. And then I just wanted to keep in mind, Exhibit A is regarding the contract and agreement currently with those who would be assisting us, but there still has to be an implementation of that plan. So that wouldn't be in totality of what would be the initiative. I just wanted to keep that in mind. But thank you. I appreciate the information. It's very helpful. Any other further questions?
Sorry, just one last question. In terms of the data turnover, right? So I think we're going to be sharing a lot of data with them in order for them to develop a strategy. We're not relinquishing any ownership of any data that is provided to them.
That is correct.
And the sole use of that data is just for this purpose. They can't use it for anything else that they may do in the future.
That is correct. If they, when they do their data analysis, they will sort of create like this database and that comes back to us. That is owned by us.
Okay.
If for any reason we are uncomfortable with just being like, here's our data, there are ways that we can work with them where they can let us know what it is that they need and we can provide it. We can, remove any personally identifying information, whatever we're comfortable with, they're willing to work with us on that.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure. So we own all the data in the database on the back end at the end of
The day.
the contract.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Awesome. With no further questions, I'll pass it back over to Madam President.
What type of action would you like to take with Resolution 20 of 2022? Would you like to keep it in committee for further discussion, or would you like to move it to be added to our next legislative session agenda for a vote?
I recommend we keep it in committee till we have further information for council's benefit.
Okay.
That's just my recommendation.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez. I'd now like to move to the work of the Building and Housing Committee.
I'm sorry, really quickly, just so we clarify, because not that we're on a time limit, but we all want to see, things start to get in progress. What exactly, besides you guys wanting to speak directly to the contractor, are you looking for?
My opinion, I would like to learn more about the initiatives and how it can translate to Harrisburg and help us with our gun crime. I feel as though we started a lot of pilots and they just kind of get left. I just want to make sure this can be sustained and effective for the residents.
Can I ask a pragmatic question, sir?
Sure.
So a lot of times when these come through grant funding, they come through other things. Part of the process is to pull the thing apart, the problem, identify aspects of the problem, and have someone who supposedly has expertise identify for the city what our options are at some level, working with the city. If this is how do you do it on the front end is my question. Because it's to help create the program. It's not to, so it can be adapted to Harrisburg. So how do we get to the point?
Well, I
have
think,
enough information on the front end.
In my opinion, if we had a representative from that particular organization that can let us know what, how the next step would look or the actual facts, because there seems to be a little bit of confusion on what the actual specific initiative would be, that may help.
Okay, I'm just trying to get some clarification on how you see because I think the idea is there's not enough capacity to develop internally before they have a contractor. But we can certainly get the contractor in it live or via Zoom or whatever to speak with you. And we have to do that anyway because we have to get the grant resolution to the council for ratification anyway. And our office can work with the police bureau to expedite that to get the resolution to council. And that would facilitate, I think, the ongoing discussion. Is that acceptable to council?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for clarifying. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will move to the work of the Building and Housing Committee. Councilman Majors.
Thank you, President Bowers. Before us, we have three bills, Bill 4, 5, and 6. I think we can discuss Bill 4 and 5 together since we have Ms. Hill here. And Kurt, would you mind reading Bill 4 and Bill 5 of 2022?
Yeah, Bill 4 of 2022 is an ordinance appropriating emergency solutions grant program funds from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development for fiscal year 2020 and 2021 and authorizing expenditure of such funds. And Bill 5 of 2022 is an ordinance appropriating community development block grant program funds from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development for fiscal year 2020 and 2021 and authorizing expenditure of such funds.
All right, thank you. And so I know these have a lot of overlap, which is why I wanted you to come forward. So you can provide us with a brief overview of, I guess we could take them together, Bill 4 and Bill 5.
Sure. So for Bill 4 and Bill 5, as you all know, this is the allocation for 2020 and 2021 regular annual entitlement funds. So this is to allocate several of the subrecipients came before council several months back, and this would just be to officially allocate those funds to send out to them. Part of the issue was there was a large lump sum of CARES Act funding that was received at the same time as the 2020 funding. So that is what has been spent for a lot of these organizations. But these funds are specific to the regular expansion and new services that they typically run throughout the year. So just wanted to make sure that I noted for the record that services are still being provided to the community by these organizations. They've just been paid out of DBHD under a separate pot of funding. But essentially for ESG, for Bill 4, the total amount for both years is $334,833. And the bill lays out the 4 different organizations as well as grant administration. The total allocation in this particular bill is $279,294 with the remaining unallocated amount of $55,529. And then for CDBG, the makeup of the bill is a tad bit different only because it's the same premise. It's for both years for entitlement. But the way the funding is allocated through my office, we split some of the, I think 1 or 2 of the actual subrecipients because they would be getting money out of each entitlement year. Now, their contract would be for the full amount, but this was just to be very clear on record of where those funds are coming from. So the fiscal year, the total CDBG allocation for 2020 is $2,063,587. For 2021, the allocation is $1,947,575, with the total remaining unallocated amount of $77,680.
All right, thank you. So just first question, on the unallocated out of the ESG and CDBG, are there any plans to utilize any of those unallocated dollars, or we don't have an opportunity, or do we have an opportunity to either open it back up to spend those funds or just reallocate them to those grant recipients that have already received funds?
So we do, we have the two, either of those are an option because of the amount of time, and these are reimbursable funds. It would, my suggestion or recommendation would be to go back to the subrecipients that have applied and been allocated and give them the opportunity to amend. These numbers that are here, we couldn't automatically do because they're based on their application request. So they would have to prove that they would be able to use those dollars that we could reallocate the remaining amount.
Okay, and then in terms of being able to spend down those funds, I know there's typically a window for each grant year. How long will we have to spend down the remaining unallocated funds, or both of these grants? I think was a 3-year.
So we actually have from HUD, we have on ESG, we have 6 years from the time the money is allocated to the city to draw it down from HUD. The way it operates within DBHD, we do 2 years from the time that the contract is signed on both ends. So the subrecipient would have 2 years from the date of the contract to spend the money, which would still be within the 6 years for ESG and 8 years for CDBG.
Okay, so then we would have options if we were to do so to potentially open it up to spend down those funds. We would just have to make sure that they are spent and allocated within that time frame, the 6-year, 8-year time frame. So it may be a shorter time frame for a new recipient, but there's still an opportunity should we decide to go down that route.
That's correct.
Right.
And we could roll it over because new money will be
Be
coming
coming
in
in.
effective October 1st.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. I may have other questions, but I'll open it up to my colleagues. I will start to my left with Councilman Rodriguez. Have any questions?
Actually, the rollover question was the one I had, so thank you for that, and
Sure.
keep up the amazing work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Daniels, any questions?
No.
Okay. President Bowers.
No, thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Vice President Green.
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Mattson
None for me, thank you. Seems pretty straightforward.
Thank you.
and Councilwoman Rawls.
Thank you, Chair Majors, and good evening. My question was the same with the rollover question, so, but everything else was great in detail, and thank you for being here. I have no questions.
All right, thank you. So I will see no further questions. I will recommend that Bill 4 and Bill 5 be placed on the calendar for a vote at our next legislative session. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your thorough report. We appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, next, we have Bill 6 of 2022, an ordinance amending Chapter 2-501, Boards, Commissions, and Authorities of Title II, Administrative Code to provide for the recording of meetings of the Harrisburg Zoning Hearing Board and Harrisburg Planning Commission. Do we have anyone from the city that will be provide us with a brief overview of Bill 6?
It was requested by council, the bill.
Okay,
So
all right. Well, I know as President Bowers, if you wanted to speak, I know we had talked about this before in terms of continuing to work on our transparency with the boards and commissions of the city of Harrisburg. This bill would allow those meetings to be recorded. It's my understanding as well, working with IT, that the recording of those meetings will also be placed on the city of Harrisburg's YouTube page so that the public would have access to those recordings moving forward. And I will then, before I open up for questions, or any other comments from members of the City Council on Bill 6? President
Yes.
Bowers.
Thank you, Councilman Majors. I just wanted to clarify that this was something that you and I briefly discussed, but it was something that I requested of the Law Bureau to draft, just given the lengthy time frame of responses from the zoning hearing board, decisions, excuse me, made by the zoning hearing board. As I think we've discussed during our last meeting, the zoning hearing board, as we know, is the most formalized of our boards, and you have to request the transcripts for those meetings. It's between 30 and 60 days, a turnaround time for the transcripts. You can request a segment of a particular meeting, but there's no guarantee that that particular segment will include information you might be interested in a particular case. The other thing is the decision. If it's my understanding that if there is a denial that's offered by the zoning hearing board, their solicitor will draft a formal decision. And there's also a delay, I think that's 45-day deadline in receiving the information.
Yeah, that's
For a
that's
particular
under the-
case.
The
Is that
municipal
correct?
planning code creates a 45-day
Thank
window
you.
when the case closes to have a formal written opinion that gets issued to the party. And sometimes there's an intervener. And so, it's hard to say there should be decisions routinely because sometimes the party and the intervener don't agree with each other. So either direction can result in an appeal that goes on there. So they do have a statutory deadline to meet.
That's correct. Thank you for that clarification. Just the length of time was of concern to me, and to increase our transparency within the community and with members of the public, I thought it would be best to begin to record our zoning hearing board and planning commission meetings for review on our the city's YouTube page. So thank you.
And there's probably a couple other points just to make in general. One is this will require staff to work a couple other evenings a week, particularly the ones who do the recording. That has to be still sort of worked through by the administration. I did speak to the mayor and the business administrator briefly about that. And this does have a secondary provision in it that if for whatever reason it's not recorded, then written minutes have to be made available for the next meeting of that board. So there'd be within a 30-day window, there'd be minutes created because there's not a recording device available at the time of the meeting. So that was sort of the one or the other process that's in the ordinance. And the minutes would be public record, just like the recording would be.
All right, thank you. So next I will open it up to any questions from any of my colleagues. So I will start this time to my right with Councilwoman Rawls. Do you have any questions?
I have no questions, just that I hope we can get this passed because I think it's much needed, especially with the huge window between individuals at the zoning hearing board and then coming in front of us. I look forward to it happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Mattson.
No questions for me, thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Green.
Thank you. I don't have any questions regarding this.
All right. President Bowers.
I don't have any questions. I did just want to clarify, we wouldn't be alone here. The city of Erie records their planning commission meetings. I just wanted to note that for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, President Bowers. Councilwoman Daniels.
So just to be clear, so the appeals period starts the day the decision is issued or the day the opinion is received?
I could not hear you.
Sorry, so just to clarify, the appeals period, does it begin the day of the decision or the day the opinion is received?
The date, I don't understand. Now I don't
I
understand.
mean, I guess
it.
if the board decides.
When the
deny
written
something-
opinions gets issued,
Mhm.
that is what starts your clock.
Yeah, okay.
So you have 30 days from the date that document is issued and served upon the party for their clock to start to file in the common pleas court.
And the recording will not affect that timeframe.
The recordings will not, frankly, they'll complicate it, but that's just life. Because they'll probably question will become whether they become part of the formal record on appeal. And frankly, I don't know the answer to that yet. And if it is, we would have to provide the court with not just a paper set of documents, we may have to provide them with a copy of the recording. There's a transcript we would provide now because that's specified in the municipal planning code. And that's an answer we just don't have. And we would see what other people are doing when we got to that point.
That's it for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Councilman Rodriguez.
Yes, just echoing the sentiments of my fellow council body. So just so for clarity, 30 to 60 days for the transcripts, but then 45 days after a denial to retain that paperwork or information?
So there's two different things there. Court reporters have special rights under the law in Pennsylvania to their work product, where you can't make copies and give them out at will. They're entitled to be paid for each of the copies of the transcript they prepare. And so that process is based on how they get paid and how many transcripts they have in a given month, whether it's 30 to 60 days. So that is just by itself. Sometimes you can expedite, but it depends on how much work that court reporter has, what technology they're using, those kind of things. But you can expect 30 to 60 days normally for us to get it. I've had them in less than 48 hours when necessary, but you pay a much higher premium for that. And then 45 days is simply for when the board formally issues the written opinion with a date on it, which has to be within 45 days of that close of the evidence in the case. So when that hearing closes, that clock starts ticking.
And for the residents at home, if they wanted to obtain copies themselves, what would be the price for that?
I don't know. It would be different because it's based on pages.
page,
And
correct.
so do you want the whole night? Do you want the particular
Right.
proceeding? Some matters go on 3 or 4 different nights. They do part of their case, they come back for another case. So there's no fixed number.
Thank you.
Sure.
No further questions.
All right, thank you. Do I see any other questions? Any other questions from my colleagues? So I guess just the only thing that we may need from the administration, as you mentioned, is what an estimate of the potential additional costs are for having a staff person being able to here to do the recording. I think we could, if we can get that in advance of our legislative session, I would like to place this on Bill 6 on our next legislative session for a vote.
Yeah, I think it'll be hard to get to a quick estimate, but there is a budget reappropriation that'll come down in the spring still. And I think the push would be to get that calculation made as part of that in the overall reappropriations. But right now it's built in. You have the salaries of people and you have to figure out
Right.
whether you're paying an extra person. If it's an extra person, that would be in the budget reallocation, but someone's got to make that estimate.
All right. Well, we have Asher here, and I'm thinking just an estimate, right? We don't need an exact number. I'm thinking the average length of time of a planning commission meeting or a zoning hearing board meeting times whatever the hourly wage of a person is to get an estimate of the overall cost, and let Asher speak to it. Just say your name and title for the record.
Sure. Asher Johnson, multimedia manager for the city. I spoke with Matt, our communications director, and I believe the responsibilities would fall on me to record the sessions if this is passed. I would basically just be scheduling myself, rearranging my schedule during the week to make it work. So I don't think there would be additional costs involved. It would just be part of my weekly schedule.
All right, thank you for that. And I'll just circle back with your comms director and our finance director this week just to work on some numbers. But thank you so much. We appreciate all the work that you do, Asher, truly. All right, seeing no further questions or comments, we'll move Bill 6 onto the calendar for a vote at our next legislative session. And I will turn the meeting back over to President Bowers.
Thank you, Councilman Majors. We will now move to the work of the Community and Economic Development Committee. Councilwoman Daniels.
Could you read the resolution into the record, please?
Sure. Just when I stepped out, just to clarify, Bill 4, Bill 5, Bill 6, all on the agenda.
Yep, my
Okay.
apologies. Yep, Bill 4, 5, and 6, all for the agenda at our next legislative session.
Okay, Resolution 21 of 2022 is a resolution approving a preliminary final land development lot consolidation plan to convert the existing building located at 100 North 13th Street into a 12-unit multi-family dwelling and to consolidate 112 North 13th Street and 109 to 119.5 Linden Street with the same.
Could you please identify yourself for the record and give us a brief background of the position of this resolution?
Absolutely. So I'm Jacob Bowen, Deputy Director of Planning with the city. So the case land development here, the applicant is proposing to convert an existing building into a 12-unit multifamily dwelling use and consolidate various lots and construct a 12-space parking lot along with associated site and access improvements. So this proposal is looking to take around 11,580 square foot building that's been vacant for a number of decades, known as the Center Press Building. It's up on 13th Street, right in the Summit Terrace neighborhood. So this went and got zoning relief back in June of 2021. Part of that request was for the use for actually having a multifamily dwelling in the residential medium zoning district. They also requested relief for some off-street parking. That was for the guest parking aspect, which was for 2 parking spaces. Because even though there's a 12 parking space proposed with this project, there was a requirement for 2 guest parking spots. So they got relief for that as well. And also they got zoning relief for, there was some encroachment of the parking lot into the setback areas, and then some of the landscaping requirements. And this was related to the general size of the parking lot that kind of restricted to have meet some of those requirements. So during the Planning Commission meeting, they recommended unanimously to approve this land development plan. They recommended approval with the following conditions. The first condition, the applicant will submit a certificate of appropriateness application and receive approval from HARB for the proposed parking area and fencing, which is located in the Summit Terrace Architectural Conservation Overlay District. Condition 2, the Planning Bureau would recommend that bike parking be installed near the building entrance along Walnut Street or via secure indoor storage area, and that the concrete pad along Walnut Street be replaced with landscape yard. Condition 3, the applicant will adequately illuminate the proposed parking lot in conformance with the environmental performance standards in Chapter 7-331 of the zoning code. Condition 4, the Planning Bureau recommends the applicant utilize the side yard space along Walnut Street for the benefit of residences, such as a community garden or outdoor seating area. The Planning Commission recommended approval for the following reasons. Reason 1, the subject property is a unique industrial structure which has been vacant for a couple of decades and experienced significant blight over that time, as well as small lots which have been vacant for at least a decade. And any project that could productively reuse this property would provide a significant aesthetic improvement to the neighborhood. Reason 2, the applicant has expressed some intention to provide 12 affordable apartment units. More quality affordable housing options are a pressing need, not only in the neighborhood, but throughout the city in general. And the provision of providing housing units will help to combat the rising housing costs. Reason 3, the project will result in improvements to pedestrian infrastructure that will benefit residents of the surrounding neighborhood.
Thank you. So do you mind repeating the condition for the first condition? It's certificate of appropriateness for HARB?
Yeah, and I'll give you a little bit more clarification for this too. So essentially condition 1 is the rear of the property. So this is where the parking lot's going to be built. It's actually in a historic district, and there's several of these in the city. So part of Summit Terrace actually is a historic district. So part of that process is they have to get approval from one of our boards, and that's the Historic Preservation Board. And that process is for that parking lot. They'll actually have to review that and make sure it just meets those standards being in a historic district. So whenever there's any kind of development, that's always going to be a condition when it falls into the historic district. So the actual building itself is not in the historic district. So that condition is just kind of talking about that parking lot development. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. And what year was the building?
It was constructed in 1922.
So we had cars then.
A couple, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So would the applicant please introduce yourself and give us a little bit of a background on this project?
Sure. Mark Kurowski and Jeff Schick here from K&W. We're here tonight on behalf of the applicant. With his apologies, Mr. Radon, the applicant, was unable to attend tonight due to a prior commitment. Not a whole lot to add to the planning report. Really, in terms of physical improvement to the site, the building is as it is. All that work would happen within the building. There's no additions to the building. So really, the only physical construction would be the parking lot that was referenced. A good chunk of that parking lot will actually be built as pervious pavement, which is how we're going to manage stormwater. And the only access, which would be, again, vehicular access for that parking area is off of Linden Street. Beyond that, the conditions that were stated, I believe actually Harb may have met last night and took action, I think, on this one.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't part of that meeting, so
Okay.
I can maybe verify that.
Certainly, we can certainly confirm and provide the letter should that have come out of that meeting. The other three conditions, the applicant is certainly has indicated to us they are agreeable to satisfying those conditions. Beyond that, happy to answer any questions you may have.
And so the current building already in itself has the 12 units, or will you be dividing it up to have the 12?
Correct. He's going to basically have to gut the interior and, retrofit or adaptive reuse that from its old use to the 12 apartments.
And what's the time frame you're looking at in terms of construction?
I'll apologize. I may not have all these answers just because Mr. Radon didn't give us quite all the data, but I know his intent is to get moving very quickly, essentially upon completion or recordation of plans. So I would hope that could mean he's in construction this summer.
And just to reiterate, you are accepting the 4 conditions that have been articulated today?
Yes.
So I'll open up for questions from my colleagues. I'll start to the far right with Councilwoman Halls.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. Good evening. Most of my questions were for the applicant, and I would hope that in some way we could speak with them before moving forward. I think that's a very important part when new developments are coming into the city. But I do appreciate you being here. But one question you may be able to answer, and I'm going to make sure I'm clear because I think I got a little confused when some things were said about the parking. So when I was reading in the resolution, there could be 14 parking spaces, but there was a relief. So you only have to do 12 parking spaces. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so then my question, and maybe for Mr. Bowman, on what basis do they get a special relief to only have 12 parking spaces instead of 14?
So that was part of, basically they demonstrated enough evidence to the zoning hearing board where they believed that they had rationale to have that relief for 2 spots. I believe that part of those rationales was that there was a spot provided for each unit. And then I think there was some constraints in the property size to provide all of those spots. I believe that was part of why you guys requested that. And then also some of the planning bureau's point of view was that we believe that based on these being kind of smaller, units, that it would be unlikely that, also more in the lower income category, that there'd be multiple cars for each unit. And when that did kind of spill over, that 13th Street area typically does have a lot of availability of on-street parking. So, if there is going to be some guests, we kind of, believe that 13th Street could kind of handle that additional impact. I know a lot of Summit Terrace parking is very tight in that neighborhood.
Right.
That's part of why we're trying to looking at the parking study. So the fact that at least that it is on 13th Street, that is kind of generally, I know in the Summit Terrace neighborhood where people usually go to get that kind of spillover parking. So from like a community standpoint, that was part of the planning bureau. We thought those 2 spots was justified.
Okay, well, I asked for 2 reasons. One, you pointed out, I did speak to some of the Summit Terrace residents, and parking is a big issue for them. And we may think because they're low, the apartments are smaller or lower income, that they're not coming with more than 1 car, but that's not always the case. We don't know how many cars people are coming with, and we don't want to assume and make decisions based off of that. So, that's why I was asking and hoping that these special conditions aren't always granted, especially when Harrisburg already has a parking issue. Making sure that we're trying to combat the issue and be proactive. So, I see the relief is here, but 13th Street does get packed with parking. So that's another assumption that, isn't completely correct. Like they do sometimes not have parking spaces. So, for me, I would like it to be looked further into in that way of sense of parking. Because like I said, we already have an issue instead of the assumptions that we may be okay. So I don't know where we can go next with that because it's already been given in a way, and I think it's something to think about as we go further.
Yeah, and something important, I guess for us, kind of recommending approval back during that zoning relief process was that they did provide those 12 off-street parking spots, which kind of goes beyond a lot of, the housing in the area now where they don't have any parking. So, if this project, say, for example, didn't provide any parking, probably wouldn't be at this point right now in the land development process. So, we do believe that the applicant does make some effort with this project by at least having a spot for each unit, which generally that is actually, for a single family dwelling unit, for example, you're required to have at least a parking spot for a unit. But just because the number of units, that sort of bumped up that guest parking requirement. So the relief was, a bit minimal in the sense of how many they requested. So that, I think that was sort of some of that justification at the time too.
Well, and if I may, Councilman.
Yes.
Councilwoman Ross. So, yeah, certainly this was approved as a special exception as part of the zoning process. So for this project, it's already kind of gone down that path. We do a ton of work in the city. We hear this conversation a lot about parking. I know that council's certainly aware we've got now a comprehensive plan that has been adopted, which more often than not can lead to some changes to the zoning ordinance at such time that may be appropriate. We're dealing with an ordinance that is quite dated. It would sure seem that a parking conversation, as part of any revisions to the zoning ordinance would make an awful lot of sense for all the reasons that were stated tonight, pro and con. So yes, I hear you. I think it's time to, if I may respectfully submit that to council as
Yeah.
part of a consideration.
Thank you. It is something we do speak about, so thank you for that. I have no further questions. Like I said, mine were mainly a lot for the applicant that I think they would maybe only be able to answer sufficiently, so.
If I may offer also, if that is something that council feels would be a prohibition to moving this plan forward to a legislative meeting for action, if it's possible that we could receive the questions, we can certainly share them with the applicant and either, if it's appropriate, provide written response.
I'm fine with
Or
that.
if council so chooses that it means, hey, another month to come back to committee, we'd certainly understand, but anything we could do to convey that, those questions would certainly be helpful, and we're willing to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
I have no further questions at this time, but I can put mine in written form if that's what we agree on at the end of this conversation. Thank you, Chair Daniels.
Thank you, Councilman Madsen.
Yes, thank you. My first question is looking at the ordinance when it comes to MWBE participation. It says we are self-performed. Could somebody elaborate on what that means?
My understanding in talking with Mr. Radon is he does a fair amount of development work in other parts of the state that he has his own crews. He has not specifically represented to us whether that includes any MWDB participation. His comment to me was whatever we are lawfully required to provide, we will do. I'm happy to, and I know this conversation happens with every project too. Development project is, if we can connect him with you, Chairman Madsen, and be able to provide him the list of subcontractors and contractors registered within the city, happy to do that for him and with it.
One correction there. I'm no longer chair of community economic development, so that would
Sorry.
fall under Chair Daniels' purview.
My apologies, Chair Dennis. Old habits die hard, sorry.
But if you could, yeah, no, yeah, I understand. But yes, if you could convey that MWB, the ideal is local,
Yes.
Harrisburg firms. So if we could send him the list and just emphasize that's a really important thing. In particular, the community is going to want to see local folks participating in these projects. I think it'd go a long way to build a bridge with him, especially I'm not familiar with this developer, usually it's the same cast of characters. So as a new developer into the community, I think that would serve as a really important symbol to hire local folks to do the work.
Absolutely. We have most definitely shared this perspective of council in advance of tonight's meeting. Similarly, the affordable housing conversation that typically occurs. Yeah. So he is well aware.
Very good. Next, I wasn't able to see it reading through, but I'm guessing based per the MWBE conversation, no participation in the LERTA program.
I don't believe so. I don't think he's pursuing anything via LERTA.
Okay. That concludes my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I'm just gonna start.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't want to jump the gun. I don't really have any questions. I was able to ask my questions during the planning commission process. So that's it.
Here comes President Bowers.
Thank you, Councilwoman Daniels. Good evening. Just have a few questions. I know that the Summit Terrace Neighborhood Association is very active. Has the applicant spoke with them? Have they participated or offered any commentary regarding this project?
It's my understanding from the zoning process that he was actively involved with the neighborhood.
I believe actually in the zoning decision, there are several residents who attended that meeting. I don't know that the record reflects whether they offered commentary pro or con, but I do know that there's conversation in the zoning decision, which certainly supports that there was conversation with the neighborhood. In fact, they commended him. Personally, we were not part of the zoning process, so I don't know what that conversation was, but the record would seem to reflect that occurred.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. You mentioned the affordable housing conversation, so I guess I'll just go ahead and bring it up. So I was curious to know the rent range for these 12 units.
Unfortunately, he has not provided that information for us. We have made him very aware of Bill 16 of 2020 and the requirements contained therein. If I could actually ask for a little help on that and some clarification. I know there's been some conversation with council previously about maybe like an FAQ or kind of like a one-pager information sheet. Is that any sense of when that may be available? Because I know we certainly struggle with some interpretation and understanding, like, hey, what are the targets that we're trying to hit so we can make sure we hit them, especially relative to the definition of the monetary amount for affordable housing and, you know, how much is considered a requirement versus how much is considered an incentive. Hey, if you do this, you get density relief, you get impervious coverage. Right, that was a long-winded question, Chair. My apologies.
It was, that's okay. So yes, there actually are some conversations. Mr. Bowen might be able to speak more to this than I can, because he and Ms. Hill, who you heard from previously, are looking to amend the package in some way.
Okay.
So right now, it's my understanding that our cap for rent is $1,700 as the package is written right now. And we know that that is not realistic for our residents, maybe some of us. So I know that that is underway. They're in discussions. I will say that the chart from HUD that we utilized to draft the language is from 2020. So things have changed, times have changed since then. So we want to be current and make sure that we are accurately addressing the needs of our residents. So yes, to answer, I guess, part of your question, there are amendments that will be made soon. Did you want to?
Yeah, just to elaborate a little bit, and thank you for bringing this point up, and also Chair Daniels, Bauer, excuse me, for bringing this up. So yeah, so we're looking at, so we actually have affordable housing project actually that will be utilizing this. So it's kind of pushing us to actually make sure everything is finalized, and in that process, city staff we're looking at potentially using maybe fair market rent values, which is actually issued by HUD, where they actually give you a very clean chart that they maintain this data where you're gonna have exact rent numbers for 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. But we're kind of just finalizing all this to make sure that this is the best approach, because we did realize that there was some issues that we kind of inherited here. So we do want to kind of clean this up before we, so we're able to actually give developers a very clear understanding, okay, what are the rental rates that are going to be getting these incentives. And this will be happening actually within this coming month, because we kind of have to, because frankly, there is a development that is coming that is using this, and it was on the books. So we will have to be fixing this within the month. So.
Well, thank you for that. And I think I just want to be clear that Bill 16 and the entire package was just a starting point. We had to have something in writing because, as you know, we get the same cycle of questions every development project. So I wanted something in writing to make sure that we were holding everyone accountable. And then, of course, making sure that our residents have safe and affordable housing is the primary concern. So it's not perfect, and I'll be the first one to say that, but it is a starting point, and we will be happy to review the amendments and discuss them and work through them. So it is productive for everyone. So thank you.
Yeah, we are excited to get this moving because it has a lot of interest and I think it is going to have a very major impact. So we, as a planner, very much appreciate you guys getting this moving.
Thank you. Actually, most of the questions that I did have were already asked, but the one question I do have is, and you mentioned that the developer, Mr. Radon, has projects throughout the Commonwealth. Does he have any, is this the first project or in the city of Harrisburg?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Can't speak for anybody else, but we have people that are coming into our community for the first time. It would be good to actually meet them and have that conversation in person. So yeah, if we could actually, meet him and have that conversation, that would be appreciated. And just going back and trying to read through some of the reporting on this, and I guess I did note that there were some members of the community that expressed some concern, as was mentioned by a previous colleague, Councilwoman Rawls, to note that parking is a significant challenge on 13th Street. And with the one-bedroom units, we may see more than just one person living in those units and have vehicles. So, parking is a huge concern in that neighborhood. So again, having that conversation with Mr. Radon and, getting a better understanding if he wants to, what the rent range of those properties are would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Chair Daniels.
And just for my better understanding of the project, the parking lot will be to the right of the building or behind it?
Behind it, it just utilizes Linden Street for access, not 13th.
Like, so behind the row homes behind the building?
Yeah, there are a number of existing homes right there at the
Okay.
corner of Walnut and Linden. It would be to the just to the north of those homes.
And the other question is, so where would the portion that would be accessible to the community be? Is that on the Linden side or?
You're referring to, I think it was condition 4 from the
Yeah.
Planning Commission approval.
The side yard, yeah.
I believe they're talking about the section adjacent Walnut Street, which if you look at our drawing, I don't know if you have the drawings, it's basically the section, just as you would come off of 13th and turn onto Walnut, it's right there in that area, I believe is where they referenced, which is where we've actually shown the bike racks that were requested by planning.
That's it. Councilor Rodriguez?
Thank you. So 12 spaces for those 10 lots, pretty much from 109 to 119.
It's 12 spaces affiliated with the apartment building itself.
Okay. Okay. I mean, it's a pretty big building, and with the parking spaces, does your team plan to help or assist with the remediation of snow removal? About 200 families, and at times it's even hard for families to return back to Summit Terrace at times. How do you guys intend to kind of assist with that, being though you'll have such a big area of the community now?
Snow removal of
Yeah,
which
just
areas?
because of like the smaller intricate areas, sometimes our trucks couldn't get through. But with you guys having such a decent space provided, it may help the community, especially in that Summer Terrace in the back areas. I've spoken to the neighborhood associations, and at times during the worst of storms, they can rarely return home at times. So maybe just to consider, just as like teamwork.
Can certainly lift that up
Absolutely.
to Mr. Radon. I
More
mean,
of a
certainly,
statement.
right.
Yeah.
He's required, I mean, of course, for the tenants in the parking lot on site and the sidewalk frontage, I believe is his responsibility by city code, right?
Absolutely.
So he certainly has to do that, but I'll certainly lift that up to him as well for consideration.
Now, the green space right besides, right, if you're looking face on, will that be parking, or is that just gonna remain like a green space?
Leave it.
Okay, maybe just to kind of, sometimes you just dribble and shoot. Maybe a playground space or something that the youth can really utilize during, maybe downtimes of school, weekends, I know there's a playground in the far end, but maybe for residents that are on the opposite side of Walnut or 13th, could benefit, just a suggestion, but thank you.
Absolutely. We'll pass that in as well, for sure.
And for Law Bureau, what are the timeframes and timelines that we're required to comply with regarding this project?
I understand the deemed approval date is May 31st. So you have time if there's something else to discuss.
So what I would suggest is to have the applicant come to our next workshop and have him discuss his project with us more thoroughly.
Absolutely. We certainly recommended very strongly that he be here this evening. Unfortunately, just had another commitment. If possible, so yes, we're not going to push the process. What I would like to do is we've been taking notes, and if there are any additional questions that council members may have, if there's a way that we could get those so that we can at least provide them to him so he can be prepared and maybe be more efficient with that time when we come back next time.
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, we can do that. So my recommendation is to workshop this the second time.
And the next work session is April 19th.
And I will note that the HARB did approve last night. Stephen attended that. So.
Great. So condition. Okay.
Great.
Thank you all.
Thank you, council members, for your time.
Thank you, Councilwoman Daniels. At this time, we'll move to public comment. Is there anyone to my right that would like to offer public comment? Seeing no one, anyone in the middle that would like to offer public comment? Please come to the mic, state your name, your address, and a reminder you have 2 minutes.
Good evening, Anna White, live on a 2nd Street area in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Just wanted to give some comments on the PCCD grant in support of moving forward as it was written. Originally, when I brought the PCCD grant in collaboration with the crime analyst, the city had full support, or we have full support from the city, but I just wanted to highlight some things that may not have been covered today. So when we discuss evidence-based models, they are simply that, they are models. So you have to use evidence-based modeling in your work for a lot of you that have nonprofit organizations. And we know that when you have pilot programs, you don't always present data to the individuals that you're going to be working with, but it is just information that you have. So you are governed by what the evidence-based model has presented to you. And right now, what we're focusing on and making sure that there's fidelity of model. So when we're talking about evidence-based programming, the way that they are switched around by cities is really determined by logistical model shifting and not making sure that you are breaking the fidelity of model. So just to be clear, evidence-based programming works in different cities because you're able to tweak it depending on the specific dynamics of that city. And anybody who has nonprofit work will understand that that's how evidence-based modeling works. So initially, as it was originally written, the grant that was presented to you all was looking at 2 phases. The first phase is data mining and implementation of an infrastructure. Right now, the city does not have a comprehensive city plan when it comes to public safety. One has not been presented by any entity, whether it's been the school district or the city as a whole. So the first phase of, as it was originally presented, was to provide data mining in order to implement an infrastructure that will be sustainable across the years, even after the model is gone. I've been doing this research for GVI specifically for about 10 years, and I stand on the shoulders of other pioneers who've done it before us, like Charlotte Plains, who has been trying to get this specific model into the area for the past 10, 15 plus years. And the only deterrent that we had was funding. So we have an amazing opportunity now that funding was basically handed to us to be able to complete that. The second phase is utilizing intensive case management, which will form the coalition that we've been talking about. In some of the research articles from Baltimore specifically, they said that what was missing was the idea of how to get social services involved. So when I crafted the plan and presented it, it was actually making sure that we implement intensive social services. And that's why it's under the community service model and not under law enforcement directly. So when you have that expertise of community fixtures working collaboratively with human services, as it is also outlined in the grant, it is so that human services, community members, and law enforcement can work together. The only other piece I will say is that it is specific on not utilizing the same nonprofit organizations. So it will not take notable nonprofits. People are not going to be able to audition. What it is going to be a community's realistic view of what programs are working and are not working. So we are finding that oftentimes people, at least when I was previously the director, were asking how can they get a piece of the pie. And there is no audition process. The community will speak for itself to say who is really effective in the community. And most of the data that is coming will be from people that already have the data. It will not be coming from the Community Services Division as it is originally written. Now, if there's any modification to that, that would be different. But as the PCCD grant was written and submitted, those are the pieces that I think were left out and could add to give you all clarity for that. And deterrence model is a large word. So we know that deterrence can happen in different ways. In Baltimore, it was a slap on the wrist. In other spaces where this research has been used, deterrence has been criminal court versus drug court. So you all are allowed under the model to pick what you all will be able to label as deterrence. So the goal is to deter people from being able to be directly imprisoned. So if there's mental health services that can bypass it, if there's drug courts that can be implemented, that is why the law enforcement aspect was refined in the model. So research has shown, like any other evidence-based program that people bring in front of you all, that there are setbacks to different approaches. And again, it's about modeling this specific to the city. Any of us that have evidence-based programming in our nonprofits understand how that works. So it's just about making sure that we model it to all the entities. The last piece is that funding opportunity is working directly with human services. So again, it's about how do we utilize our local resources and stop working under the sickness of silos and making sure that we're implementing programs that have all of the entities together in order to make a trauma-informed approach. So it is collective impact. It's also trauma-informed care, and it's also looking at how do we create a system while analyzing and addressing the ways that crime is happening from the ground up. So it's looking at why does crime happen? How can we prevent? How can we intervene? And then how do we create a sustainable, comprehensive safety plan that we can utilize well after the grant is gone? So hopefully that has added some information. And I'm hopeful that in bringing a program manager to this very important grant, that we'll be able to utilize for the first time $500,000 in a way that benefits the real concern, which is how do we not have this cycle happen well after the grant period is over? Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in the middle, is there anyone to my left that would like to offer public comment? Seeing no one, the time is 8:16. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We stand adjourned.